I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart.
So you just asked me if I had any thoughts about Jack Sarfati. And, we were, prior to that, we were speaking about incredibly brilliant women like Sarah Jane's The Dream Incubator, or, the Onirafont. I love that word. Or Onirapomp. Emery Amerigu, the Greek mystagogue, Joanna Kujawa. Okay, there's some noise. Did we just go into deep space?
Hello, Joseph.
Probably that person just muted their mic.
Yep.
And that's probably Nathan. Okay, let's see. Give me just a second. We'll actually do the introit. So let us take a moment together to remember all of those beings who have striven to establish a beautiful way of being on our world and on all worlds. Those men and women and children and elders and animals and living places, brilliant of spirit and gentle of heart, and also fierce, who strove throughout their lives to amend fundamental problems on our world, which are primarily, it appears, with humans. They arise in our species. So somehow at the same time as having the capacity to establish something paradisical here, our species seems fascinated with the possibility of hell as well. And I want to remember all of those beings, past, present, and future, who strove to become living medicine for the problems that our species so trenchantly recapitulates generation after generation. And we gather in the hope of sustaining their vision and dream and establishing amazing and beautiful and intelligent ways to be human together. Remembering them inspires us, and may we serve their dreams and passions with the same brilliance and heartful awareness that they brought to their existence and their struggles. Oh, beautiful ones, we remember you. So, we were talking about brilliant women. I named a few. I'm particularly amazed at this point by Sarah Janes's work. She has studied dreaming her entire life. One of the things she said that I think is really brilliant is that she felt that if she could just sustain lucidity, this is really important to me because I've had a similar kind of concern. When she was very little, she was lucidly dreaming all the time, just naturally. And she's not the only person like this. A number of the people that have spoken with her are similar. And as a little girl, this I think is hilarious and brilliant. As a little girl, she thought, if I can just sustain that lucidity, across the barrier into waking, I will defeat death. I will live forever. Now, I think that's amazing for a number of reasons. The first is, what did children know of death anyway? I mean, they don't. I almost died once when I was a little kid, and I was just curious. I wasn't scared. I realized, like, oh, I'm going to die right now. And I was like, oh, okay, well, ain't nothing I can do. I'm going to sure miss mommy. There wasn't any, like, terror or anything. I'm like, I just fell down on the ground unconscious and, started dying. Guess it's kind of cool that I didn't have to actually die at 5 years old. I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were locked up. My mom woke up when she heard the thump of my body on the floor. She was napping on the couch nearby. Managed to make it out to the living room before I passed out. She got me breathing again. But yeah, so Sarah thought, if I just learn to stay lucid all the time, then I will never die, which is such a brilliant thought for a child to have. Not only that, I mean, how oppositional to everything the adults are doing, which is almost always the opposite of lucidity. Right? The waking world of human beings is the catastrophic opposite of dream lucidity. For most of us, much of the time. Now, there are exceptions, when we're being really loving, or we're trying to grow together, or even in our meetings. We at least verge on lucidity because we sort of have this agreement, right? We start out with an agreement to try to see and remember and learn. And even like the things that I said in the beginning of the meeting, man, I really mean those things. Those are not mere words to me. My heart desperately needs a context in which to chase its origin and the beauty of the possibility of our existence with other, people like myself in those senses. And I've studied dreaming in my own way my entire life. I know a lot of unique things about dreaming that I think are very uncommon. Even in my interview with Sarah, my first one, and I hope to do another soon, she was startled by one of my questions, which is, what do you think the source of illumination in dreaming is? This had never occurred to her. So I feel kind of excited that I was able to ask a question that she had never yet considered about dreaming. But I could ask her a lot of questions because I'm a weird mind. But yeah, she's really brilliant. And the thing about lucidity is that it unifies the normally distinct aspects of awareness. And one of the things that I always wondered was, all the dreaming experts are talking about lucid dreaming, but I haven't heard one of them talk about lucid waking. Apparently this idea never occurred to them. But it seems to have occurred to Sarah, right? Because even as a little kid, apparently she thought that if she could retain the lucidity that she commonly experienced in dreaming, into her waking experience, that she would be free from death. That's a really trippy idea. Now, of course, it's not actually clear that death exists. It really isn't. The death of our body exists. That's real. That's going to happen in so much as this is what we mean by death. But the death of the self is wildly unlikely, in my view. There's almost no evidence for it, other than, you know, the person disappears from our experience, which seems like a lot of evidence, but isn't. So the death of the body, that's real for sure, but the death of the being that what is the right word? That animates, right? The being that animates the body. Very much doubt this myself. There's so much clear evidence, in my view, for that not being real. And rather than being destroyed or ceasing to exist, what happens is a transition into a different layer. Yeah, I think. But yeah, it's just brilliant that she thought, if I can just remain lucid, I will defeat death. That's awesome. What a brilliant idea. And then, of course, you know, we find all of these traditions. And this is going to get to something that George was saying in a recent text message. Find all of these traditions that associate something very similar to death with healing impossible things. There's a story, of course it's anecdotal, and that during the mysteries of Alephsis, right, where they would take thousands of people from all walks of life through an initiation. First, they would have to purge themselves, right? So it would be 6 months, I think, of abstention from sex. Well, it's not hard for me. I can abstain from that forever. Eating meat, right? Fasting, not abstaining from fasting, but fasting. Cold water bathing, a lot of sort of hardship, 6 months of prep. And then you carry a piglet with you, you get a piglet. You traverse this long path over a number of days together with the other initiates, and then you go through this process, which is what, you know, Hillman, I don't think he actually understands the process, but he does know that there was a way to experience death and rebirth, even though I don't know what he thinks about it. This is one of the things I hope to ask him about if I get a chance to talk to him again. And he thinks, you know, this was a thing done with intoxicants, or that the medusae were involved. The medusae? I don't know how to pronounce that. A-E at the end. It means plural. It pluralizes the medusa. But it's clear that there probably were substances involved. There's a record of a man who'd been, I think he'd been blind his entire life, and he went through this and came out with the ability to see. It's clear that not everyone, like, right, you had to be selected to be healed, but you had a shot at it, right? Even if it was a, you know, impossible to heal injury or something, you had a shot. And you know, this is a this is a thing where you meet the divine beings. So essentially, you're going to travel from this world to what I refer to as the origin world. And that origin world, which most of us have no conscious experience of, I have experienced it, or I claim to have, you know, if people want to question me about it. I have to say that compared to that, the realness of this world is trivial. It's not real at all. The origin world is this impossible thing. You can be in both worlds at once. You can be in the origin world and incarnate here at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised if babies have this experience and then forget it as they become enculturated and languaged. I think they probably do have this experience. I don't know what their experience during conception is. I think they do have experience during conception. It's unclear how that, or if that's remembered. But yeah, there's some kind of a strange amnesia that afflicts us in the process of incarnating, right? Not just, by force of incarnation, but in the process we undergo, which is a process of lucidity, right? Like the loss of lucidity. And if we had lucidity, then I think it would be impossible not to sense the origin world, because the thing that you call your mind is actually the spark of that world in the incarnate world. So that means that it's as if there's a kind of lightning that's touching you all the time. And if that lightning of the origin world were to go away, you would perish immediately. You would certainly not be able to have awareness, in my view. I realize this all sounds theoretical, but I'm going somewhere with this. So the ancient Greeks and other cultures, certainly the Egyptians and others before them, though Hillman would like us to believe, this all starts with the Greeks, or the I can't remember, Pelagians, I can't remember, Pelagians, yeah, something like this. The sort of the pre-Greek peoples. But no, it starts way back. And other cultures have known about these things, but in the Greeks, the mystery traditions literally take you down under the earth. You kill the piglet to symbolize, before you begin, you kill the piglet to symbolize the death of the sovereignty of your human animal desires over the desires of your spirit. So your soul, or origin, what I call origin. So the idea is that it's sort of to flip over, so that you can no longer be enslaved by the desires or the fears of your body. The slaughter of these piglets, poor little piglets, is not merely symbolic, but it's also symbolic of putting to death the stuff that keeps you trapped, that causes the amnesia, which is mostly your human fears and your desires for sensory pleasures, right? And there's a really good reason why you'd want to put those away. And the reason is that if you could even for a moment experience your soul's senses, you would never give a shit about any kind of pleasure you could ever have in the flesh. You would not care. You're like, sex? I don't give a shit. Food? Don't need that. Water? Who cares? Sunlight? Doesn't matter. There are pleasures so profoundly, ecstatically beyond anything you can imagine, that the pleasures that we seek, the comforts that we seek in our incarnate aspect, are just, you could just forget about them. They have no meaning in the face of even a few moments of this lucidity, of understanding what you are and where you come from and who your actual family is and what your role in that family is, and all of these things. So George was saying last night, I'm gonna ask him to sort of step in here and take over for a time, because I've been blathering long enough. I'll just finish up with a couple things. So post initiation, the successful initiates have essentially died. They've experienced death while they're alive. This is what is referred to as the second birth, that we sometimes hear about in religious traditions, particularly Christianity, although Christianity steals this idea and reformulates it as something that you can only happen if you worship Jesus, which I think is absurd. I doubt Jesus even wanted to be worshipped. If Jesus existed, I don't think he was like, worship me and be free. I don't think that's what he was talking about at all. Most likely what happened is that the tenets of the mysteries of Alephsis were misconstrued by a small group of humans who decided to make a power play and rip off all these ideas and then trademark them and say you'll die forever and be punished forever and blah 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 unless you do exactly what we say, and on and on and on. But the goal was to be absolutely free from being compelled by the animal aspects of who you are as a human being. And so an inversion, right? What happens is the soul, the sort of underneath of you, right, flips over and becomes on the top, and the animal aspects are subjugated to it. Instead of your soul powers being subjugated to your animal aspects, which is miserable suffering. It's like a fish not knowing what water is and not ever being in water, right? This is how most of us live. We will live like this. A bird never having flown, a snake never having slithered. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think death is more like a latent potentiality within life rather than an event at the end of the life process. So death is more like an ever-present possibility within life itself. So it can only be realized within life. So yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
So you have to die while you're alive in order to experience it. It's not at the end of life, I suppose. That's what I mean.
It's actually, there's no way to die that doesn't happen in life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like sunrise can only happen in the nighttime. There's no other way for that to happen. Right?
Yeah. But like life and death aren't separated by an interval. I suppose that's what I mean. What I mean
Mm,
to say is that death is within life itself, within the waking experience of life. It
mm.
hovers over what life itself is, as opposed to being at the end of life. So, to actualize death is initiation. So I think there's a dimension, um, there's a dimension to life which, when actualized, yields this kind of occult um, influx of information, which I think proceeds from this. Uh, the same force that we attribute to death, that we call death. There's a relationship or a link there.
That's absolutely brilliant. Obviously, this is well known throughout many traditions. In Zen, uh, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Sasaki Roshi, who said something like, the man who dies once on the pillow will never taste death again. Right? And what he means is die to the illusory self in meditation. Experience the complete cessation of that nonsense, that illusory deception. Uh, and be rescued from all suffering. Then you can choose things like if you want to incarnate again or not or what, all kinds of things. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Well, there's a similar relationship between light and space, or light and darkness. So, ordinarily we imagine that light and darkness are two opposite extremes, or that they exist along a spectrum, but really darkness and light interpenetrate. So, instead of thinking that light is propagating through space, you could take the opposite stance and recognize that space itself is within light. There's an inverse truth. So I guess that's also what I mean. So So to recognize that death is within life is the same kind of act as recognizing that space is within light. There's a very similar, I think, structure there.
Yeah, most people would find that terribly counterintuitive. I don't. Um, it's absolutely brilliant that you say things like this. One of the ridiculous features of human cognition is to take aspects of existence as separate. Right? And I guess you could imagine a box in which there's no light, right? You could say, like, well, inside this box, we created a situation where there are no photons in there. Okay, great. But the box is in the universe. How will you evict the universe from the box? Right? You have the box is already in something that is swimming in light, time, space, beings, awareness, intelligence, all these things. So you can make a box inside which you think there's absolutely nothing, right? Absolute zero, right? But the box, you made the box. So how can you evict your making of the box from the box? And the universe, you are an expression of the universe. The box is an expression of the universe. So you might think like, no, we can make nothing in there. There's nothing. You're wrong. You're just wrong. There's no way to make nothing.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that also, I think, to some extent, illuminates what you were saying about the dream world. So, what illuminates the dream image?
Right.
So we tend to think that light illuminates an image. So, we think that the beam of light, like a flashlight in a dark room, illuminates some kind of, spatial or spatially extended image. But you can take the opposite stance and recognize that the light beam itself contains an image. So the image is within the light beam. It's the exact opposite,
Right. Yeah. This is
What?
one of the, see, this kind of intelligence is so rare. It's one of the reasons I adore your mind. You're a very unique intelligence as a human being. One of the most unique intelligences I have ever come across. Keep going, by all means. And go to the dyspepsia. Let's have the fucking comedy skit. Yeah, let's go.
Wars, right?
Yeah. Because it's exactly what you're saying. These religions weren't there to cause you to worship beings. You didn't. First of all, let me just be really clear about something. It is impossible to worship that which you are, that which makes you and sustains you moment to moment. It's not impossible to adore it, but worship would be like if I constantly sang George's praises with having no experience of George at all, right? and actually refusing to have any contact with George. So what I'm trying to get at is, if the origin world were to emerge even partially in your awareness, you would instantly sing and dance and adore it helplessly. There's nothing you could possibly do to stop those things from happening. Your soul would ring like the sun with familiarity, recognition, awe, wonder, ecstasy, joy, freedom. Your whole being would just ring like a bell. And I know this because I've experienced it directly. It's the opposite of worship. You can't help it. It's like a bird flying or a heart beating. There's nothing you can do that could possibly intervene in that if this were to touch your awareness while you're, awake or dreaming. And so this idea of worship is what happens only after that goes away, right? So it's like, oh, you put me in a prison where I can't feel my nature or origin, then I could start praying or something, like worshiping, something that I have no real experience of or very little experience of. And I'm just trying to say that it's like the backwards thing you're talking about, where they think light illuminates. It's, of course, reasonable to think the light illuminates things, but there's something that illuminates your mind, without which you can't recognize light or illumination or anything.
Right.
And so originally, these many of these spiritual experiences were oriented as medicine. Renewal, resurrection, healing, the death of the blindness of our common day-to-day waking experience, the reawakening of wonder and awe, and ecstasis, and also intellect. Go ahead.
Right. Well, this is what ties it back to Coca-Cola, because John Pemberton originally marketed Coca-Cola as an herbal tonic. It was supposed to be like a miraculous cure for all sorts of ailments like indigestion, headaches, and fatigue. But over time, it basically became the product of marketing hype. And I think something similar happened in Christianity. You can actually trace the history, the editorial history of the books of the New Testament, to see how they were interpolated or modified and then compiled with this clear, like, editorial strategy and a theological design, which I think people like Amon Hillman actually misunderstand to some extent. Like, you can't read the books of the Bible independently because the theology is baked in, and they were written with respect to each other by a single group of people. So the theology is there. It isn't something that you superimpose on the text. It's something that you're supposed to glean by design. A very specific message that you're supposed to take away from reading the text. So I think Amon Hillman gets that wrong, but yeah.
What do you think he thinks?
Well, he seems to think that the Gospel of Mark is a historical document, or even like, the Gospel of Luke, which clearly they aren't. They were written probably over the span of 10 years by maybe the same person or a single group of people. So I think Amon Hillman is aware that the Gospel of Mark is based on Homeric episodes. I think he knows about Dennis MacDonald and like literary mimesis or mimesis criticism. But I think where he errs is in thinking that Jesus performed these acts that Mark describes. I don't think that's like as if it's a historical document. That's not. I don't think that's what it is at all. So because Mark is aware of Paul, and because Paul was probably an ahistorical person, like a confabulated literary construct designed by the Proto-Catholic Church or the Proto-Orthodox Church to counter Marcionism, Mark and Paul have a unified theological message. And that message is centered on grounding the character of Jesus in a specific Jewish context, which probably wasn't there to begin with. So basically to Judaize this character, to give him a Jewish genealogy, to give him a place on earth, because Marcion, contended that Jesus was some kind of alien that descended from space, and he was a fully grown human being without a birth narrative or without even a resurrection narrative, sort of like a holographic projection. So that position was called Docetism, and it was called a heresy by the early church. But it seems to have been Marcion's position. So because Marcionism was gaining popularity in the 2nd century, the Proto-Orthodox Church had to publish their own canon, because Marcion was the first to publish a collected volume containing the letters of Paul and the gospel, because originally there was only one gospel, and it was Paul's gospel. Whereas these editors and these redactors that came later, between like 155 and 166 AD, roughly in that window of time, they came up with this fourfold gospel message, really as a symbolic act, because there are 4 winds and there are four pillars on the earth.
Directions. Yeah.
And of course, this fourfold structure in the Gospels is based on Hellenistic rhetoric and Platonism and Stoicism. Really has nothing to do with Jesus. I mean, So basically, if you read the Gospels in order as you were designed, as you were supposed to read them, you begin with Matthew and then you proceed to Luke through Mark. But this structure is a dialectic, which has a deliberate purpose. You're supposed to move from Matthew to Luke in order to transcend the dialectic in the Gospel of Mark. So transcending the dialectical structure of the synoptic Gospels is really an old motif within like the Platonic dialogues. It's an old rhetorical device. So yeah, it's a theologically designed polemical document, and it's directed against Marcionism. So because Marcionism was like Pepsi, okay, just like Pepsi, it was bold, it was disruptive, and it was increasingly popular, right? Just like Marcionism, it was also stripped down and like easily accessible for the average person. Um, because no one had to obey Jewish law in order to be a Christian, according to Marcion. So he totally rejected the Old Testament. He thought that, the God of the Old Testament was this being called the demiurge, who was effectively like what Paul calls Satan. So
Mm-hmm.
when Paul talks about Satan in his letters, he really seems to be describing this archonic being called the demiurge, which was the same being that created humanity, or gave humanity these physical bodies. So, like in
Mm-hmm.
Genesis, when God clothes Adam and Eve in skins, the Gnostic reading of that book of the Bible was really that skins or garments or clothing were effectively what the human body was. So the human body is like a
Yeah,
spacesuit or some kind of suit that you wear.
it is. Yeah,
You're right. Right.
it
So in order
is.
to become a Christian, you have to develop this other kind of suit, which is tailored to a heavenly ecology. So when you die, you acquire this new heavenly dwelling, which is literally like an astral body of some kind that can
Yeah,
traverse the celestial
soma
sphere.
pneumaticon. Yeah,
Precisely.
the
Yeah.
soma pneumaticon. Yeah,
Yeah, it's an actual body of some kind with a
yeah,
corporeal presence, but it's more like a photonic body or a body
yeah.
of
I don't
light.
know if corporeal is the right word. What do you mean by that word? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Feel free to correct yourself if you
Yeah,
didn't mean
so it
that.
has some kind of elemental presence.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's a mode.
like a UFO, basically. Like a UFO has a corporeal presence, right? I mean,
Okay,
but it
okay,
isn't
yeah.
entirely physical.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
It can sort of phase in and out of existence because it's based on like the propagation of light or something.
Yeah, or the propagation of what time space emerges from, or
Yeah,
something.
precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But the Cola Wars followed the same structure, which is really bizarre if you look at like the history of soft drinks and the competition between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. The fact that Coca-Cola was losing market share in the 20th century and had to adopt a more Pepsi-like flavor in the form of New Coke is precisely what happened in the second century when the Catholic Church interpolated Messianic gospel. So it's the same God, like it's the same being over and over again. It's like it's the demiurge or something, dude. Like,
Yeah. But keep going. That just blows my fucking mind.
well,
That's
because Coke
the
is a
most
God.
hilarious comparison I think I ever heard in my life. Keep going. Yeah.
Because Coke is the perfect object. It's basically it's a God on Earth. So if you look at Coke, the sense in which a bottle of Coca-Cola is the perfect object is that like it basically abides by all these bizarre laws of desire, and it seems to have been manufactured through a similar kind of process of like competition and like certain cycles of addiction or habit formation. So it's it's
Yeah.
it's part of a control system.
Inspiration under addiction. Yeah. I'm with you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Right? Like the inspiration that results from the most addictive thing you can possibly produce. Or the inspiration that chases the possibility space of addiction in such a way as to produce Coca-Cola and the bottle and the logo and, you know, and the marketing and all that.
Like if you look at the shape of the bottle itself, the shape of the bottle activates certain complexes in the human mind. So like the shape is designed to look like the outline of the female body.
Right.
It also has certain like phallic connotations, which is interesting. So it functions like this kind of totem, like a shamanic object or like a fetish, right?
Actually, it functions like the image of a god.
Yeah.
Except deprived. It's the proto form of a god, right? It's what you'd get if you took the human features away, right? And the animal features away, and you just represented the principles themselves.
Yes. Well, my claim is that that's what a totem is. So the totem is the incarnation of a god, but its incarnation usually assumes a more technical guise eventually because the point of origin is eventually lost or forgotten. So it turns into this utilitarian object. But I think, yeah, Coke is sort of like in this.
Holy shit! That's what tools are.
Yep.
That's what the computers are.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our cars are. That's what our smartphones are.
Yeah, exactly.
So once you get past, there's a process, right, where the god, you know, the totem or the being that is being encoded in the form of an idol, as you subtract the human, plant, and animal features from it more and more, eventually you get a tool. And then what you get instead of those features is function. Right? You get the thing it does, the magic thing it does.
Yeah.
I mean, a watch is magical. A car is magical. Even a lock and a key, that's a magic act, right? To open the way. Please continue.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the function of an object as a technical object is always downstream from this more original, devotional, or symbolic point of origin. So I think that applies to any technical object like an automobile or a computer.
I think it also applies to a fork.
Certainly, yeah.
A knife, you know, a spoon.
Yes.
All that stuff, right?
Yep.
I'm with you. Keep going.
Well, yeah, I mean, so insofar as Mark is aware of Paul, and insofar as Paul was probably Simon Magus or some kind of street magician, yeah, the books of the Bible aren't historical documents. They're designed to convince you of something. It's basically like a marketing campaign. So it works just like Coca-Cola, man. Like it's the same exact structure. Like
Yeah,
even
it's
in
the
terms of
real
the
thing.
timeline, like the amount of time that it took to compile these books, I think is synchronous with the new Coke campaign that was sort of spearheaded in response to the popularity of Pepsi. So it was a rapid kind of process. So the books of the Bible were probably compiled over a decade. They weren't written over the course of generations and then organically compiled like in the 3rd century or something. The book that we call the New Testament, or the whole Bible, really, both the Old and the New, as a coherent document or a coherent book, was probably already around by the time of Marcus Aurelius in the 2nd century, so around like 150 AD. So it was brought together very early, but also quite late with respect to what most scholars think, because most scholars think that Mark was written around 70, so soon after the siege of Jerusalem, and that the Pauline epistles were written maybe around the year 50. But it seems more clear to me now that the Pauline letters and Mark and the other Gospels were probably written around the same time. and it may have been overseen by Polycarp or Irenaeus. So it actually has the same kind of structure as like art forgeries. If you look at the history of like forgeries like the Hitler diaries, or how modern art forgers create what are called twin forgeries in order to lend themselves credence or to create these self-referential systems of legitimacy. It's pretty clear to me that like the early church fathers were engaged in something like that. It was like what do they call it? A pious fraud. So for the sake of countering Marcion and destroying Marcionism, they had to confabulate these things. I think that was the
And when
motivation.
does Marcionism show up? Where's its origin?
Between the years of like maybe 130 and 150. So I think, yeah, between those 2 or 3 decades, Marcion was in his prime, and he was in Rome. He debated Polycarp in 154 or 153
AD, yeah?
AD. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So Marcion was basically teaching that the God of the Old Testament was evil or Satan. He was the first person to publish Paul's letters as a coherent sort of collection, and some of those letters are in the Bible. But his collection actually began with Galatians, not Romans. Okay, so which is really fascinating because Galatians presents this schism between Paul and the other apostles. Um, Marcion seems to have taught that Paul was the only true apostle and that he had no connection to the original apostles. And you can see that in Galatians because Paul says that he didn't receive his gospel message from any man. In fact, it was a revelatory experience for him. He never actually met Jesus in the flesh. He only ever encountered this heavenly vision or series of visions. He only met the apostles 2 or 3 times, and they were all seemingly like antagonistic. And he sort of recounts that in Galatians, which is pretty fascinating. So that seems to have been the follow-up to Mark, because if you read the Gospel of Mark, it ends rather abruptly. And there's no resurrection narrative, and there's also no birth narrative. So that's sort of like what Marcion was saying. So later what happened is that these redactors came in and they gave Jesus a Jewish background. And they also tried to harmonize Paul with the other apostles, like in the Acts of the Apostles.
Yeah,
and in the
because
Gospel of
probably
Luke.
what Paul had written was too powerful to omit, is my guess. Right? It's like an ingredient in the Coke, right?
Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
cocaine, right? Right? It's the cocaine in the Coca-Cola. You can't get rid of that. So you have to explain it in terms affine with the myth you're trying to make.
Well, no, Paul was originally considered a heretic. He was actually the father of all heresies. He was called Simon Magus. So he was a polarizing figure in the early church, but then they had to rehabilitate his image. So they had to
He was
strengthen
called
him.
Simon Magus?
Yes.
How did you... Is this common knowledge? How did you come to know this? This is unfamiliar to me.
So the Gnostics all traced their teachings back to Paul, who was called Simon Magus by Justin Martyr, as well as in the Pseudo-Clementine writings. Yeah, the Pseudo-Clementine recognitions contain a lot of information about Simon Magus. And so the Catholic Church, or the Proto-Orthodox Church, seems to have conflated this figure that we now call Paul with Simon Magus, who was the father of Gnosticism. So,
And how would you... I don't mean to interrupt. Please keep going. I have a question, though.
So the only place where Simon Magus appears in the Bible is in the Acts of the Apostles, and he's framed as this person, this individual, this magician, who was really in opposition to Peter. And if you read Galatians, you'll see that that's precisely who Paul was. So whoever Paul was, Paul was never a historical person in the sense that, Paul may have went by that name. I think Paul is some kind of literary construction, not unlike Jesus himself. Like an amalgam of several people, sort of like Santa Claus. Like Santa Claus is an amalgam of several different people. He's not.
Yes.
Um, so viewing Paul and Jesus as these composite ideological constructs makes sense of the history of this whole movement, because similar phenomena have recurred in history. It's not just that Jesus never existed, it's that, people like Ned Ludd never existed, or, King Arthur. It's King Arthur, right? It's like King Arthur.
Right.
No one
Merlin.
thinks that King Arthur was a historical person. Very few people do. But irrespective of that, the same process was at work, because the same socio-political process took place in different parts of the collapsing Roman Empire. So in England, the collapse of the Roman Empire yielded this legend of King Arthur, whereas in the Near East, it yielded this legend of Jesus. But I think it was the exact same process that gave rise to them. And
So
that's what
it's a
most
process
mythicists, they
of
don't acknowledge. They don't go that far.
Say that again, please.
Most mythicists don't go that far. They don't see the connection between Jesus
Right.
and King Arthur, or the cargo cults that developed in the 20th century as a function of military invasion and so on. Like, that's what the Roman Empire was doing. And that's how, I think, how these figures became historicized retroactively. They were sort of retroactively historicized.
So it's okay. So now what we have is you take some kind of a basic ideological doll, right? The doll of a messianic being, a rescuer, a reincarnator. In fact, you're actually taking, it could be understood that you're taking the doll of the oneiropomp or the psychopomp operant in, for example, the Mysteries of Alephsis. I'm using Maria Merigu's pronunciation. She's actually Greek and demands that we pronounce it properly. And I'm fully willing, for really important reasons. You're taking something like Amon Hillman's Medusa, right? The one that introduces the other world in death to the lie, right? Which is one of the things that Amon is profoundly motivated and is fairly certain that he's accomplishing, right? He's trying to kill a bunch of lies. That's what he thinks he's doing. So you take this doll of the lie killer, right? And then what you do is you just dress it up historically, mythologically, textually. You do this by stealing entire histories, right? You Judaicize Jesus. You kingify Arthur. And so what you do is you wrap this Coke bottle, right? You wrap the Coke bottle until it looks like something familiar to the people you want to enchant with it.
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
And then it becomes the real thing.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right? Because things aren't real. There are no real things. Reality belongs to origin, not things. Go ahead.
If you look at the old Coke advertisements, with the songs and the jingles, you can see the Christian element, like, or it's the same force. It's the same force either way.
Yeah.
So how do you sell brown sugar water? That's the question. Like, how do you make brown sugar water the real thing? That's
I mean, brown sugar is pretty amazing all by itself. So it's probably, you don't have a big job, right? It's not going to be real tough. You just get people to taste that brown sugar water. It mostly takes care of itself. So then one of the things you do is just add some cocaine.
It's a stimulant, right? It's a stimulant. That's exactly
Right.
what it is, right?
Yeah.
So it feeds into these cycles of addiction. So it's a feedback loop. It's its own support.
All of this has to do with counterfeiting origin for the sake of creating systems of authority in human persons and cultures, right? So that some group or person can be authorized by people outside, right?
Right, exactly.
It's an authorization con, which is exactly the opposite of what was going on in Alephsis, right? It's nothing like what was going on in Alephsis. There was no con. It was the opposite of a con, I think.
Yeah, the taste of Coke is both bitter and sweet, but you also forget the taste of Coke quickly. So you can have more than one Coke in a day, but you because you quickly forget the taste, you find yourself drawn back. And the suds, the fizz,
Yeah, the fizz.
the fizz actually releases endorphins. So it's really just an experience of pain. That's what the fizz actually induces. So it releases these endorphins that people find pleasurable, but it's just a pain receptor. It's really fascinating. But I think Christianity has a similar kind of structure.
Say more.
Yeah, well, most Christians, I think, implicitly agree with Marcion in the sense that, in my experience, like most Christians that I tend to meet, they usually just reject the Old Testament entirely. But the pleasure that attends being a Christian, right, or loving Jesus or whatever the case might be, um, really seems to be about like swapping or trading these subjective impressions. So it sort of works like Beelzebub. So what most people call Jesus is really no different from the Lord of the Flies or Beelzebub, because in the Bible Beelzebub was used as this kind of like this like a meditative aid. So you can imagine how like someone who meditates on like the buzzing of a fly's wings or any insect can use this kind of noise as a vessel for their own enlightenment. It works just like a Rorschach test, and the whole Bible is like a Rorschach test. But if you meditate on babbling water or the sound of a bug's wings flapping, you'll start to see certain patterns. But those patterns emerge out of your own mind. Basically, they're a reflection of your own identity. So you're seeing an aspect of yourself in the noise. It's basically just chaos. It's just like an interference pattern out of which this holographic projection emerges, right? And that's what I think most Christians are doing when they read the Bible. They're looking at a bunch of white noise because the Bible contains all sorts of contradictions and it's not internally consistent. But as you move through it, you're basically just engaging in a self-imposed Rorschach test, and you see aspects of your own identity reflected back at you, and that can be therapeutic, I think. But it's really no different from worshiping Beelzebub, because that's what the shamans were doing. I mean, they were listening to the Lord of the Flies, and the Lord of the Flies would give them information upon meditating on the interference pattern. I mean, it's just so. Um, but that's exactly what like the fizz. It's exactly like what takes place in worshiping this Coke bottle. Basically, it's no different. I mean,
I'm having trouble at the moment trying to figure out whether what you're saying is like profoundly enlightening or a kind of pure cynical nihilism. I can't tell. You have anything to say about that?
Well, I mean, history is repeating itself, so you can read that nihilistically, I suppose. I mean, if
Do
history
you?
were repeating itself, then there might be cause to be cynical, I suppose. But that's not really my angle.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that because I mean, personally, I'm not big on cynicism or nihilism. I tend to believe in a meaningful and profound understructure to existence. It's my belief. It's not a thinking thing. It's more like the thing that makes thinking possible for me, or like an origin thing. Um,
No, what I'm describing, I think, exists in the sense that, like, it has some kind of metaphysical relevance or physical relevance to me. Um, it's like a control system. So the control system recurs. It has certain ways of hemming intelligence in, um, but I don't think it's localized to the human mind or the human body. When I describe these relationships, that's really what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to get at this more general force.
yeah, this control system is very interesting. It's something that occurs across a broad range of thought and literature. I'm particularly thinking about the Black Iron Prison of Philip K. Dick, um, a system of social control that obscures the true nature of reality. Uh, I don't know how familiar with Dick's work you are. Of course, the work of actual Dicks is our own bodies, but I mean Philip K. Dick.
I know more about his life than I do anything about his writings, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's fine. Though I strongly recommend uh, reading Valis, if nothing else, which is an acronym standing for Vast Active Living Intelligence System.
Yeah, I think Philip K. Dick was a true mystic.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was. His exegesis is pretty mind ripping, um, and stands out as a truly incredible. I don't even know what to call it. A transcendental. It's okay. So it's we would say, like, well, it's just a text, dude. It's a book. It's not really a book. It's not really just a text. Um, it is possible to compose things in text that transcend the possibilities of ordinary text, and thereby transform the category of the object into something transcendental. Of course, uh, this is what we this is what it is said the Bible and the Quran and the Torah and so forth are, right? Um, the difference, though, I don't know. I know the story of how the Quran was composed. I don't know how it was actually composed. The Bible is weirder. The Bible is definitely Frankensteinian, right? It's some bunch of stuff stitched together. It seems very obviously thus to me. Do you see it similarly?
Yeah, I do, more or less. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think the
Yeah.
Bible has a unified message, but it contains contradictions, which is, yeah, really fascinating. Um,
Well, it's not just that it contains contradictions; it's that it's stitched together. Right?
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't like some people sat down over the years in generation after generation and composed this one document that could thereby be essentially univocal. Um, it's a
right.
much
Yeah.
weirder. It's an assemblage, right? what do they call those pieces of art where you just put different things into it?
Collage.
Yeah, there's a more complex word, like a French word, I think, that means like to knit together disparate kinds of objects. I can't find it in my vocabulary at the moment. The exegesis, which is, I think, over 3,000 pages of material written mostly by hand by Philip K. Dick, in the aftermath of a religious experience that I think lasted less than a few hours, was definitely helpful for me. Obviously, after reading something like that, like many people would, I began to hope that I could somehow understand what would generate such an experience. How could I have an experience like that? I certainly did not believe or realize that it was possible for me to have such an experience. I didn't think that was possible. Nonetheless, I wanted desperately to have such an experience. And much to my surprise, I eventually had an experience that, I think, I don't know, was like 1,000-fold, unless what Dick experienced, what Dick experienced was just exactly the same thing compressed into a much smaller temporal interval. It's certainly very similar, although I was less inclined to try to understand the Black Iron Prison and much more inclined to try to understand features of the historicity of the development of consciousness in our species that led to the problems that we struggle with and experience today. And, throughout human history, it's been going on forever, essentially. But yeah, the exegesis is very trippy. There's like a 900-page book now. There used to be, I have a bunch of books about it, right? There was this book called In Pursuit of Vowless, Selections from the Exegesis. And I had that before the Exegesis, edited by Pamela Jackson and Jonathan Leatham, was available. That book is enormous. I mean, how many pages is it? Let me look. Is it like 1,000? It's 950 pages long. And someone recently, I know we're getting a bit off topic here. We can return to the core shortly. But somebody recently I came across, I think he was lying, but I'm not positive he was lying. He claimed to have a 25-volume leather-bound edition of the entire exegesis. I can't find any evidence of that existing. So I think he was lying. Or, having me on. He was a really trippy cat. Very, very intelligent person, musician. I guess what I'm trying to understand, George, is how you see the Bible, because you talk about it on the one hand in the sense of it being sort of white noise, that since it is incoherent, since it's fundamentally incoherent, or as you said, chaotic, you can get anything you want out of it. This seems to be one of the ways you understand the Bible. Am I reading that?
Well, no, it looks like chaos, but it is coherent.
Okay.
So, like an interference pattern looks chaotic, but an interference pattern contains an image, just like a beam of light. So the contradictions are more like a balancing act. just like in Shakespeare. So in a Shakespearean play, characters present opposing points of view, which nevertheless constitute a unified work. So the Bible is quite similar to that kind of
But we are also
process.
similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
I am similar to that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
This is
Exactly.
why.
Yeah.
This is why methods like internal family systems are particularly useful or effective. It seems to me because they take into account this multiplicity, right? Like there seems to be a sort of a dichotomy, a fundamental dichotomy between the unity and the facets that comprise it. And if you go with the facets, it looks like babbling multiplicity. And if you go with the unity, it looks like univocality. It's neither.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Is it a particle? Is it a wave? Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, the Bible contains its own cancellation within itself. So, yeah, the Bible contains its own opposite within itself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what I mean by contradiction. So it's, yeah.
I mean, I think that's how I am too.
Right. Yeah. And that's how it propagates.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gospel of Mark is like the atheist text. So it contains atheism within it. And in fact, Christianity is probably the result of atheism. If you go back to the pre-Socratics and the actual genesis of monotheism, as I think Amon Hillman tentatively suggests, monotheism is probably downstream from pre-Socratic monism, which was associated with rejecting the existence of the gods like Zeus, because it was really bound up with understanding the weather and meteorology and other natural phenomena without appealing to the authority of the gods. And I think Socrates and Plato mediated that transmission to what we today call Judaism. But I think Judaism was probably the result of this Platonic ambience in the Hellenistic world. So Judaism is much younger than we usually suppose. And the gap between Judaism and Christianity is much narrower than we usually suppose. So they both originated in the same crucible. It's not as if Christianity necessarily stemmed from Judaism. I think that's a mistake. They were like siblings that had the same parent, if that makes any sense.
So I want to bring us in a direction briefly where we carefully examine a feature of our own moment-to-moment awareness and experience. It's an organ in the anatomy of what I'm going to call consciousness, right? To be awake and aware. And it functions very differently if we are asleep and dreaming from what we will experience when we are awake. And this organ is the organ of authorization. I think if you look back over recent speakings, it's not the word I wanted, but I'll use it, in our conversation now, you will discover, including in this moment while I am speaking right now, that in order to speak something, I must authorize it within myself. I have to believe that it is useful. I have to have some way of believing that it is useful, true, or important, good, desirable, something, right? And in order to do that, this requires a system within my awareness that authorizes it. Is this clear at all, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's clear.
Okay. So I want us to pay attention to the functioning of that system for a moment. You will notice that in order to emit the statement I just made, I want us to pay attention to the function of that system. I must first authorize that statement. I will not emit those words if I have not first authorized them. Is that clear?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you can see that there is a fundamental system that is operating beneath our ordinary awareness. We use it every time we make a move in consciousness. Every time we enact our consciousness, we enact it. It's not just there. It's not like we're swimming in the water and so we're always wet. That's not what happens, especially not while we're awake. Something a bit more like that happens while we're dreaming. But while we're awake, prior to engaging in an act of consciousness, and particularly the act of speaking, there is usually beneath our awareness a system that is functioning, a system of authorization. And what's going on historically, you can see this happening, is that there's a transfer of authorization from, wow, okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I can imagine that there's a transfer from something like ambient communal consensus, right? We together, what would we all most desire and agree to, right? If we are 50 people in a tribe or something, what would we all most desire and agree to? That could be the original source of authorization. Of course, there must be layered arrays of authoritative aspects to human awareness, activity, and so forth. So that the sky, right, the sun, the sun is blatantly obvious authority. If it should change slightly, everything dies, or life becomes extremely difficult. Whether it's too hot or it's too cold, you know, things are going to go wrong. The moon clearly is an authority. Similarly, the stars, and so forth. But what I'm getting at is there was a transfer over time of authority from living fundamental aspects of our existence and experience, like the sun, the moon, stars, the mountain, the river, the moon's cycles, right? Not just the moon, the cycles of the moon. The women's cycles in their bodies, the cycles of emergence, flourishing, and senescence in the land and the living places and the animals and the insects and all these things, which were immediately concrete to our human experience, not like they are for us moderns where we know they happen somewhere, but they don't much happen in our cities, which have mostly evicted all of that and made a bunch of dead structure. So what I'm getting at is that eventually what happened is that authorizations started to become personated as gods, and then sometime later, this weird personation thing, I love this word, by the way, to personate. This personation thing, we threw away the facets, which were the gods, Asclepius, Zeus, Poseidon, Athena, Demeter, Persephone, Aphrodite, Athena, Clio, Ceres, Cori, just, you know, to go with the Greek pantheon, part of the Greek pantheon. We threw all that away, and then we just decided, not we, that's the wrong word. It wasn't, we didn't make any decisions. What was happening was a process in the development of communal human thought systems, right, that underlie, that sort of encompass us rather than emerge from any person. But one of the evolutionary problems was this concept of monotheism, where the authority becomes effectively dispersonated, right? It's no longer personated as Zeus or Hermes or, Medea. Now it's depersonated, and you have the Coke bottle, right? The Coke bottle of monotheism.
Yeah.
No one will know his name. You cannot know his shape. He is featureless, but the source of all features. He is abstract authority, absolute, infinite in unknowability as he is in power. Omniscient, omnipresent, right? Tear it up. Go wherever you want to go. This is the first time I've seen this in my mind.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, the God of Paul, or the God of Christianity, is really an unknown God of love. That was what Paul seemed to be preaching. So he was espousing something like apophatic or negative theology, the idea that God, the all-powerful God, is devoid of predicates, sort of like the idea of the one in Neoplatonism or in Plotinus, the transcendent unity that governs almost physically the lawfulness of the terrestrial sphere. So when Paul looked at the earth, I think what he probably saw was something like the lawfulness of elemental interactions. So he refers to the archons that control the planet as these demonic forces, or Satan. But he also seems to espouse this notion of ether, or this more heavenly domain. So like in Aristotle, for example, the terrestrial sphere was separate from the celestial sphere. And the lawfulness of the
Yes,
celestial
yes,
sphere
yes,
was eternal, and it was
yes.
governed by certain cycles. Whereas the elements on Earth are more rectilinear. They flow from these cosmic forces that descend from the stars. And this was also an alchemical motif, the idea, even in Stoicism, of these rational seeds that descend from the heavens. So the idea of the logos was ultimately transmitted by Stoicism to people like Polycarp, who was active in Asia Minor, where the Bible was probably compiled. And the Gospel of John was, I think, sort of bound up with this Stoic understanding of physics. So, yeah, so Stoic physics, I think, is the ultimate teaching of the Bible in the Gospel of John. You're supposed to read the Gospel of John after progressing through the synoptic dialectic, these first three books that form a trinity. The fourth book is this more transcendent level. And I think that was a deliberate rhetorical device. But yeah, so Paul seems to have thought that the resurrection body was this heavenly body which was exempt from the law. That was the whole point of Christianity. So as a Christian, you were exempt from the law because you possessed this heavenly astral dwelling, or clothing, like a spacesuit or something. Yeah, through which you could basically judge the world. So when Paul talks about
It's an
judging the world,
expression body. It's an expression body. But please continue.
yes,
Sorry.
yeah. So when Paul talks about judgment, when he talks about how human beings will eventually judge the angels and judge the earth, what he seems to be referring to is this astral agency. So in the same way that the stars govern the motion of the terrestrial elements, the photonic body of the elect will govern something about the motion of, the terrestrial elements on Earth in time during the parousia. So when Jesus comes back, because Paul thought that Jesus would actually come back from the heavens. He was some kind of ET, basically, who was going to come back and transform the entire material plane. So the whole material plane would be metamorphosed. It would be transformed. That was what he was saying. So it's really only intelligible in this broader context of how the ancient Greeks understood the elements in their interactions. And there was also an alchemical dimension to it, because the alchemical dimension was also bound up with the transmission of these astral seeds, or these astral forms, in order to transform material bodies. That was the whole point of the alchemical work, or the alchemical opus. And so there's a very clear link between Gnosticism and the alchemical tradition in Egypt, around the 3rd century AD, so sometime after Paul. Yeah. So when we talk
this
about the
is
law
all.
or
Sorry, go ahead.
judgment in Christianity, we're really talking about a physical process that I think Paul was aware of. It's not like this abstract, legalistic.
No, it's basically a transformation of something resembling the laws of physics.
Yes.
And this all makes sense to me experientially because, I mean, this is going to sound weird. I kind of don't care. This is one of the reasons we do this. One of the reasons we get together is so that we can say the things that we ache to say, but ordinarily we are not in a context where it is either possible that they will be understood or that they will not just be outright rejected. But in any case, after that long and bizarre apology, what I'm going to say is, okay, I'll start out somewhat didactically. So it strikes me that there are two kinds of texts historically. There are texts that were written by humans who had direct experience of divine matters, and they wrote from that experience, but they could not write without. Okay, this is one of the weird things. When you have an experience which is outside, it is from beyond your normal array of experiences, and it is from beyond what humans normally will speak of or write of together, then you are challenged, I know this firsthand, to determine how you will interpret the experience and whether or not you will adopt authority from existing traditions. That what I said there is really important. Because if you don't adopt authority from existing traditions, you will have to establish authority for the first time on your own, for your narrative or your description, or whatever it is you hope to reveal to the humans. And this is fundamentally problematical. It's an aspect of something that happens every single time in history that humans have experience that is from outside the narrative structure of familiar models of the world, existence, the divine, the holy, and so forth. You have to do one of two things, essentially. You have to either adopt authority from existing narratives and say, I am the new Jesus, right? I will tell you, I'm writing the Third Testament, right? Or you have to just do, your own damn thing. And even if you read Dick's exegesis, you're going to see him doing the same thing, right? What he ends up doing is talking about his experience in Christian/Gnostic terms. So first realize that, right? You have to basically, almost all, in fact, representational cognition is a game where existing authority structures are acknowledged, modified, fossilized, and transferred across generations. This is what Alfred Korzybski calls time binding. All right, so there's that. But here's what I'm going to try to say, more or less ex cathedra, from the chair of direct experience. When Toymaker was with my mind, it was unlike anything I ever imagined possible. I know I always say this, but I really mean this in a deep way. I never imagined anything like this was possible. I was driven by forces in my emotional, my psyche was replaced by something that I absolutely trusted. And I could see what was wrong and never do it. It was like I became pure. Law is required for blind people. You need law if there are idiots, right? If the inner sun that would normally, naturally rescue you from stupidity and viciousness and wrongdoing, most of which is really just ignorance, right? It's not like I don't know if I believe in the existence of evil. Toymaker didn't really show me things about evil. What he showed me was occlusion of the divine. Occlusion of the divine is the only explanation you really need. Though you can use the toys of evil and things like the demiurge and stuff. He told me stories of what he called the first angel, showed me stories of this angel, which is not evil. In fact, there wouldn't be anything at all if that angel didn't exist. There would be nothing. So there's no organ of existence that you can do away with and now everything's good. What you can do away with is the absence of the inner sun. Naturally, you will not, it would never occur to you to go against it if it is shining in your heart. It's just like water making you wet, right? You can't imagine unwetness if you're just always wet in this way, so to speak. And so what I'm getting at is, one is freed from laws by, in my view anyway, from my direct experience of something I know to be divine. You don't have to believe me. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just speaking from my own experience. And anyone who's listening, I'm not asking you to believe me, right? I'm just talking about what I remember in my own words. I was free from laws in that you need laws primarily when you are catastrophically excited. Like in various indigenous cultures throughout history, not all of them, the unity of the people was so profound that the idea of having rules was ridiculous. They would never consider it. There was no such thing as a rule in many cultures, including some of those around the Great Lakes when the French encountered them. They had nothing like the formalization of laws. And even in my interview with Amon Hillman, one of the funny points is when I talk about, like, you know, you and I are friends. We don't have to have an agreement that you won't kill my children, that you won't steal my house, that you won't, like, rape my wife. We're friends. We don't have to, like, there's something that pervades over our relational space that's inherently there without being stipulated. And part of the reason I know this is from before Toymaker. It's from when I was little. And when I was little, it never occurred to me to try to hurt another child. Ever. My father had to threaten me. Right? He's like, if that boy hits you and you don't hit him, I'm going to hit you. So you figure out which person you want to fuck with. Right? This is what my dad would sometimes say, right? I mean, in my father's defense, he was very concerned that I wouldn't be able to, that I would be bullied because I was sensitive. He was. And that I wouldn't be able to stand up for myself. So he was very worried about this. He wasn't just a demon, the way that sounds. But yeah, so there is a thing where there's a feature of our nature and our origin and our being as humans that is, it's hard for me not to use this word, even though it's very unclear what this word means. It is perfect. And it is not perfect in that it is achieved as perfection. It is perfect in that, A, it does not veer from the direction of beauty and truth, and the depth of its beauty and truth is infinite. So it's not achievable, right? You cannot be it. It's a way of traveling in relation, in being, in development, in seeing, all of these things. Okay, that's the end of my homily. Thank you for bearing with me. This is not science fiction. Actually, the fiction is the bullshit that we're experiencing while we're awake. That is lie. It's just basically lying. And you can lucidify the lying with acts of intelligence, insight, awareness, creativity, play, experiment, rescue, medicine, love, kindness, right? You can lucidify the blindness with these things. You can become medicine. And I like to think that in our meetings, when we're doing something amazing, I think we're doing pretty good today in my, evaluative fucking whatever, right? Then we're approaching something that more or less resembles our potentials for being not merely human, but for being true. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this is what most Christians understand by justification by faith alone, as opposed to good works, right? Because that was the whole point that Paul was trying to make.
Say more about that point. Clarify it for us, please.
Well, Paul was saying that no one needed to abide by the law anymore. No one needed to do good works because the law was an effect of transgression. So the law pertained to living within a body of flesh. I mean, that was what Paul seemed to be saying. So human beings were forced to live in suits of skin by virtue of some primordial transgression, which was originally disembodied. I think that's actually what Paul was saying.
What do you mean by that last part, that was originally disembodied? What does that mean? I don't understand yet.
That Adam and Eve were like angels, which acquired bodies after transgressing. So the return to the angelic state, or something like it, was what Christ effected as this second Adam.
Obviously, oh yeah, God. Okay, so obviously, there's a bunch of obvious things here. And one of them that I'll just state briefly and then please continue, is that Christ is the tree of life. Right? Christ is the tree of life that the angel was set with a spinning sword, with a sword that spins in every direction. He is the food of transcendence. He is to be eaten.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you have to eat him.
Yeah. Yeah, so Paul was referencing Genesis and other books, for sure.
But Genesis, there's no way Genesis is Judaic. No way. That's a stolen story. It's missing most of its content.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice that even Genesis contains two creation accounts, among other things. Which, yeah.
we're already doing the Frankenstein thing, right? We're trying to stitch something together from lost pieces.
Exactly. Yeah. And Genesis also contains two sources of light. So the light of the first day and the light of the fourth day. So there was some kind of primordial light source, which wasn't the sun or the moon or the stars that Genesis describes. So you can see these mirror images that crop up from the very beginning and that carry through the entire Bible. I mean, so I guess that's what I meant earlier by claiming that these contradictions are somehow also unified. It's like a hall of mirrors.
I don't know if it's a hall of... Well, I'm not sure what makes it a hall of mirrors. I agree with the contradictions and their unity. Okay, what the fuck was I thinking? Jesus was the tree of life, right? Because so first of all, when Toymaker, the main questions I asked Toymaker the whole time I was with him were like, show me more about Genesis, show me again, keep showing me, show me the next story, show me another one, right? And so I learned astonishing things about the story. And the reason that I asked a lot about that is because it seemed to me that whatever happens at the tree of knowledge is the fundamental problem for our people. And if we could understand that, we could make medicine for it. Also, it should be obvious that if you were Moses or whoever was writing the story about the tree incident, one thing you would do two things, most likely. The first is you would encrypt the story so that it would be a weapon that would injure your enemies, the enemies of your children and your people. You would encrypt it, right? You'd put poison in there so that, especially if your people had been persecuted, right, or enslaved or something, you would know that your enemies, first of all, you're going to write this down, so your enemies are going to get the book eventually, right? And you don't want to give them your power, so what you'll give them is like Stuxnet, right? You'll make a virus in... This is something that humans ignore about the Bible and they don't get it, even though it's blatantly obvious. Those books destroy cities, right? They make cities attack each other and kill each other, right? And cities are the enemies of any nomadic people that keeps getting enslaved by them. So I'm just going to mention that. The first thing you would do is you'd put weapons in there that would cause your enemies to kill themselves or each other and to not mess with your kids because they're too busy fucking each other up. And then the second thing you would not do is you would not tell your children and your grandchildren the following. You would not say, once things were beautiful and good, then we did a bad thing. And from now on, you're fucked. That's not what you would do. What you would do is you would say, a bad thing happened, a difficult thing happened, a difficulty was introduced, and here's the medicine for that difficulty. But you would encrypt it so that only your children could understand it. This is my sense of what is going on in the tree incident after talking at great length with angels about it, right? It's a story that contains the medicine for the problem. It's not just, oh, the bad thing happened, now you have to wait for the Messiah to come someday and he'll fix you. No. All right, so now that I've got that out of my maw, what comes next? So, knowledge is partly a kind of death. When God says in the Bible, when we read in the Bible, in Genesis, in English, that God says, don't eat of that tree in the midst of the garden. He's saying something very complex. It's not actually that there's a tree in the garden. That's not what it is. Although one of the things he's saying, it could be understood this way. Oh God, should I tell this story? Yeah, okay. Holy shit. Yeah, I now see this for the first time. I'm actually having insight at the moment. No, I don't know if I want to go through all of this. It's complicated and it might, I'm not sure if it's useful. I'll just say it really briefly. The first angel punched a hole in the origin world, and that hole led into the world of material existence, and that's what could be understood as the demiurge. It's the cutting angel. And what it does is it cuts a hole in the origin world, which is above time and matter. And that hole becomes both a fountain and the possibility of incarnation for aspects of the divine. It's as if the hole causes in heaven, quote unquote, a kind of a rain, and the rain that falls into that hole becomes stars and beings down here. So it's like a reverse fountain, and that could be understood as the tree of knowledge, not an actual tree. Also, it could be understood that the proto-form of the earth, where that will be severed, because nothing cannot be severed from origin. It has to be severed to exist. Origin is non-existence. So for something to exist, it has to be severed, and where you were severed is your umbilical cord. But the earth, the proto-form of the earth, before the earth existed, the possibility of the earth, it had to undergo this kind of severing. And the tree of knowledge can be understood as the umbilicus, where the earth was previously connected to heaven and where the separating angel is. And when God says, don't eat of the tree in the midst, this word midst in Hebrew, it comes from a triconsonantal root, tavek. Very few people know this, almost no one. I didn't learn this from a human. I learned this from Toymaker. It comes from tavek, and tavek does not mean midst. It doesn't mean in the middle. It means to cut apart, to put apart, to separate. So when he says, don't eat of the tree in the midst of the garden, he's saying, don't eat of the tree where the separation is. This is absolutely crucial if you want to understand the story, because the concept of separation is the primary problem in human cognition. It is what gives you power. It's also what blinds and cripples you, because you think separation has primacy, right? It's just like the problems we were talking about earlier, George, with light. You think, oh, light is a separate thing, when that's impossible. There's no chance of that being true. It's only true in cognition, where you can cut apart the elements of being and then reflect upon those parts and then think about, well, how do they fit together? Yeah, how do you fit them together? Oh, well, no, there is no together. There's only unity, right? I know I'm getting kind of excited here. So then you have next to that, so he says, do not eat of the tree of life or you will die. This is what's important. Knowledge is a kind of death. Knowledge is dead inside potential for what would have become insight, adoration, relation, resurrection, wonder, awe, play, creativity, experiment. Why experiment? Because the material universe is incomplete. We complete it by being in it, by being as it. We don't complete it as in we finish it, right? We complete it in the inspired improvisation of existence and relation, wonder and learning. That's what completes it, right? It's beautiful to have amnesia, because then you can play your way back to insight. This is what I mean by completing. So knowledge is a kind of dead thing, right? It's not like relation. It's not like kissing. It's like a photograph. It's a structured dead thing in consciousness. It's a fossilized remains. If you could choose between knowledge and insight, what you would always choose is insight. Because insight is like, wait, what? Oh my God. Whereas knowledge is like, oh yeah, that's a car. Well, one of those things is dead. Every time you look and you go like, that's a car, your mind dies right there. It just dies into its previous fucking forged constructs. You see how that really is a kind of death? So God is right. What he's telling them is, if you meet the angel that makes cuts in the manifold of existence, it will give you its toy. Its toy is a knife. It's a knife in your mind. And thereafter, you will become fascinated by making cuts, and you will forget unity. And you will die into incarnation. You'll die into incarnation. You'll become material. You will suffer the amnesia of material incarnation. You will forget your origin and nature. And you won't die actually, because what'll happen is, essentially your spirit will undergo a weird process where it dies into bodies, and then it slowly may or may not undergo anamnesis, right? The unforgetting. And then conceivably, here's where things get really interesting for me. Conceivably, you will experience what is called the second birth, but is actually the second death, because what dies is the amnesia. The amnesia dies and you are resurrected while incarnate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? You're resurrected while incarnate, which is the goal of the Eleusinian mysteries. It's the promise of Christianity, however bizarrely forged the packaging is, right? The wrapping paper of that stuff is way crazy weird and confusing as hell. But the weird thing about even Christianity is that if you just tell people that it's possible to be born again, that might be enough to get them moving in that direction, even if the wrapping paper is all confusing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can have a religion that is completely wrong, right? It's just a bunch of lies. And yet, a bunch of lies can still lead people to authentic, real redivinization, right? The redivinization of the human, which is what Maria Margu, the Greek mystagogue's book, is about, the divinization of man through the Eleusinian mystery process, which is meant to put to death the blinding, pervasive, black iron prison in Philip K. Dick's, nomenclature. Put that to death and to reestablish the sovereignty, because you actually die, right? You die to your humanity. And this is what I experienced during Toymaker. I don't claim to be special. I don't claim to be accomplished. I'm not making any claims about me. I don't care. I'm a human being just like you are. I have had experiences that I do not understand. I will be the first to tell anyone who asks me. And they go like, do you know what happened to you? I'm like, no. But I can talk about what happened to me through a variety of frameworks. And I remember what it was like. And still today, when I experience insight, what I call insight, which is the revivification, the resurrection of the possibilities of my intelligence beyond the knowledge that I've had previously. And somehow when we get together and do what we're doing here, this invokes that process for me, which is part of why I come here, which is what I think church is supposed to do, but doesn't mostly. Yeah, so I don't know what happened, but I have memories of my experiences and what it was like. And what it was like was to be mostly in the world of actual intelligence, insight, origin, and adoration, and only very partly in my humanity. And the promise of this, both people were telling the truth. So God says, eat of the tree of knowledge, you will die. And the serpent, who's not Satan, right? It's not called Satan. It's not the adversary. It's a serpent. It's very important because the serpent, it's not fundamentally evil. It's not even bad. Once again, without the serpent, you got nothing. And what you don't want is to have just the origin world or just the universe as we know it. That would be miserably horrifying. You don't want that. What you want is those two things together. Because when they are together, that is profoundly beautiful and amazing. Even though the possibility of amnesia comes to life in that situation, it's really profound what happens, because now that rain that comes down into existence from the origin world in this model that I'm playing with, in this toy I'm making of it, now that rain can become enriched in a way that is impossible if it simply remains in the origin world. Hopefully that makes sense. It can become enriched by the adventure of incarnation, which is impossible in the origin world. Can't have that. There's no adventure up there. All right, so the devil says, no, you won't die. You will become makers of worlds. And both people are right. God is right, you will die. The devil is right, you will not die. Your spirit can't die, right? So what'll happen is you'll undergo death of incarnation. You'll die to your origin self, and you'll become incarnated and thus blinded and immiserated, though you'll still experience things like beauty and passion and dreaming and wonder and learning and love and all of the virtues, right? You'll see the night sky, oh my God, right? The mountain, the river, the praying mantis, the octopus, the pod of dolphins, the beehive, all those flowers. You'll see the incredible body of origin emerging all around you as nature. And that's really profound. And also, I mean, there is an analog of that. There's a metalog of that happens in the origin world. And there's also a between world, right? There's a world where, there's a world, so to speak, a universe. Like origin, there's nothing there. I can't explain it. I've seen it. It's impossible for me to make words about it. But then there's an interim, a liminal world between that world and our universe, where souls exist as beings. And there's a world above that too, where it's mostly like archons and angels, and so to speak. There's different ways of thinking about it. But all I was trying to say is that both people are right. God is right. You will die. Knowledge will kill your memory. You'll become very fascinated by knowledge. Okay, that's what happens to us when we're born, right? We're born without knowledge, okay? And then as we develop language and representational cognition, we lose contact with the origin world. You can look in the eyes of an infant, you will see the origin world alive there. Boom. The companion is still with the child. You can see it. It's right there. You may not think of it that way, but you will see it, right? It looks like, the infant looks like it's from another universe. When you look in its eyes, you can see there's another universe. And then as it starts to become representational, those relationships become inhibited and sclerotic. They're clogged. And what they're clogged by is the child's emergence into physicality and its undergoing of the processes of enlanguaging and enculturation. The enculturation of the humans to live in a culture of objects and systems and structured lies.
Well, ordinarily, I think of knowledge as the opposite process. So you can think of knowledge as a mode of forgetting. If you experience knowledge as something like a bag of marbles that you carry around and deploy, like certain propositions or factoids. But I experience knowledge more in terms of what you were describing as completeness or completing the being itself. So when you come to know a being, you complete it in a certain sense, which I think anyone does, even someone presumably in ignorance. But I think more in terms of turning back or reversing the arrow of time. Like that's how I tend to think of knowledge. Knowledge is maybe in my experience different from what you're describing. But I can see what you're saying.
Okay, I can see what you're saying too, and I agree. Both things can be true. Again, right? Just like I was saying, God says, "Don't eat of that tree, you'll die." The devil says, "Nah, you're not going to die." They're both right. And what it hinges on is the meaning that we associate with death. And in our case, mine and yours, it's the meaning that we associate with knowledge. And obviously, if you thought knowledge was death, most of the activity that you engage in, you would stop doing.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me
because
phrase it like this.
Yes, but see, this is the thing. For you, knowledge is anamnesis. It is unforgetting the lies that built up over history.
Yeah, right.
Right, and I agree. I agree.
When you complete a being, the completion of the being takes place in perception, but then that perception opens a window to everything else. That's what I'm calling knowledge, I suppose. So knowledge, to know one thing is simultaneously to know all things in disguise. You just don't remember it. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Wait, say that last part again, please.
To know one thing is simultaneously to know all things, but you don't remember all things. So that's what I'm calling knowledge. It's this process of traversing the bridge. But
yeah, see, this is the thing. You're using knowledge more in the term, more in the form of intimacy with thought, with previously established frameworks and so on. Yeah. Intimacy. And I agree. There is that form of knowledge.
It's like a hermeneutic circle. If you were to read a text, the intelligibility of any sentence is really only possible if you know the entire text. Right? So to know one thing is simultaneously to know all things. You just might not remember all things. I guess that's what I was saying. And it's an act of perception. It's a mode of being. So knowledge and being aren't separate from me. They're one and the same thing. It's like the same act. And that's what I thought you were saying by completeness. I think you're right about that. And I immediately resonated with that.
So I want us to preserve both of the definitions of knowledge that we've been playing with in the past like half hour, because I agree. I don't see there's any conflict. I remember though. See, here's my problem. This is the problem that I have. Having been lifted above knowledge and tasted something that is so, like literally as if it remade my bones, that it is not knowledge. It is like lightning of continuous insight that exceeds itself every time I refer to it. And I don't have that experience without Toymaker with my mind. And yet my mind can, at the same time, my mind can approach that experience under certain circumstances, again, without Toymaker with me. Having had that, it led me to see what is meant by the danger of knowledge. And one of the things that happened to me when I was in Stockton after my father passed away was I was talking with Luca Rade for the first time. He was in Portugal, and he's such an amazing mind. What a brilliant human being. I was super excited. We met through Facebook, whatever. I was in my dad's backyard, and something flew into the backyard. And I'm crazy about insects, and I studied them since I was very small. I know a lot about them. It's very uncommon that I encounter an insect or an insect phenomenon that I don't recognize, and I didn't recognize this thing. It was huge. It was like the size of a walnut. It was flying around the yard, bright, iridescent turquoise thing. And I was absolutely, it placed me, it's like encountering an angel, or being struck by lightning, or, an earthquake. It just fucks up when I encounter something that I've never seen before and I don't know what it is. It's similar to being in a car accident. Suddenly the world is just put into a superposition experientially for me, and this happened with this insect. And then I realized, oh shit, it looks like a fucking scarab, like the Egyptian scarabs, which were really important to me as a kid, and still to this day important. And I was just absolutely transported by this, and I wanted to take a picture of it. By the way, this happened to me last night in a dream. Something really weird happened in a dream. I tried to take a picture of it. I wanted to make a video of it in the dream. And the guy I was with said, no, don't do that. And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, that'll wreck the magic. You're trying to save the magic by making a picture of it. You think that, what does that do to the actual magic? Like now you're not participating in the magic anymore. Now you're recording the magic. And this is a very trippy problem for humans, as you can see by the state of the internet and so on. Anyway, I wanted to take a picture of it, but it never landed. And it flew around for about 3 or 4 minutes, so I got a really good look at it. And I wanted to know what it was. I wanted to see it and hold it and know what it was. I wanted the knowledge of it. Yeah, the kind of knowledge I'm talking about. Because the kind of knowledge you're talking about is a lot like my experience of it while it was flying. And the kind of knowledge I'm talking about is what happened next. About 3 weeks later, I was walking to the store and I found the carcass of one of these beetles. And I picked it up, and then I could look at it. I could hold it, but it was dead inside. Nothing alive in there. And so that's when, for the first time, I began to reflect in this very specific way on this feature of certain kinds of knowledge. The kind of knowledge where when you know the name of something, you mistake that for intimacy and depth of understanding, or even for the relationship. Not you, but one. One makes this mistake. So the child's fascinated by the little birds. Oh my God, the little birds are here. And then the child learns those are just sparrows. And they're still kind of fascinated the next day, but within a few weeks, they don't see the birds anymore. They just have the token, sparrow. Oh, I know it's a sparrow. I know what that is. It's a sparrow. And they ignore it. So this is one of the dangers of the kind of knowledge I'm concerned about. Love to hear anything you think about this.
Oh, of course I agree. Yeah, the presence of death, understanding knowledge as a way of death or a mode of death is pretty significant to me. Because it pertains it pertains to what we were discussing earlier about the relationship between life and death generally, or the presence of death in life. So to understand life as a kind of death.
Yes, this is where I'm going. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, it brings me back to that aspect.
Yeah, we got it backwards. We think death is the scary bad thing that happens at the end of life. No, death is getting born. And life is the thing that happens when you're unborn.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And we're sitting down here terrified of death. The thing that's terrified of death is not you.
Yeah, what we usually call knowledge is some kind of aborted malformation, which could be transformed along another route, I think. And that other route is what I mean when I talk about knowledge. Because
I usually use insight for that, but go ahead.
Right. And maybe that's a better term for it. Because usually when I talk about knowledge, I mean something like a bridge, something like a window, almost like a kaleidoscope. So to know a plant is simultaneously to know all plants, because the plant doesn't necessarily precede you. So this also goes back to our discussion of light. So we tend to think perhaps that we walk on the surface of the earth and we encounter beings, and that our task in knowledge is to record or retrieve all the predicates of beings and then to tabulate them so that we know what something is. It has certain parts, it has certain attributes. But that's not really what I mean by knowledge. To know something is to complete it, as you were saying, and in completing it, to form a bridge to other phenomena. So it's a more dynamic process. I guess like knowledge is as dynamic as the world of becoming itself. It's not like knowledge is this static, quest to tabulate what is, or what being.
Right, to affix the catalog of identities.
Yeah, see, that's the trap. See, that's the other route that I'm talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So when you complete a being in knowing it, you commune with it. It's a relation. So, yeah, to know a plant is to commune with it, and that communion is like love. It's tactile. It's emotional. It's not. It's not a matter of dissecting or performing an autopsy on something or stripping it down.
Right. So we have, okay, great. So we have these two kinds, right? And
Yeah.
God is essentially saying, the death kind will compel your people and you'll get trapped in it. And the serpent is saying, you will experience understanding, and by each part you will better come to understand the whole.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm
And
following.
both things are true, right? If both things are true. Certainly our people, it's like the joke. It's like the joke that I was laughing my ass off earlier when it said, bonobos can detect when humans are ignorant and respond to that. And I was like, okay, the bonobos are done with. It's over for them. Because if they can detect human ignorance, they're not going to be detecting anything else. There's basically nothing but human ignorance. So once they start detecting that, it's over for them. So certainly, our species at the group level is unimaginably stupid. I mean, one could never guess that it was even possible for any being to become as confused as our species appears to be at the group level. It's inconceivable. It's like that joke in The Princess Bride where the Italian guy is trying to poison Dread Pirate Roberts. And inconceivable! You just never could imagine it. And yet, at the same time, it's almost like, what do you pay attention to? The map, the whole map, which is mostly valleys, right? A lot of ignorance. Or the topological features of the map, where you see the mountains and you're like, oh my God. In the ignorance, there are these towering stars of insight and unforgetting. Both things are true. Yeah.
Right. I'm saying you won't die. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but the way that you relate with knowledge. See, this is why it's very easy for me to understand you when you say this, because you exemplify what you speak of. Right? You enact what you're speaking of. This isn't you making words about something that could exist or be. This is you describing, just as I am describing my experience, for example, of Toymaker, you're describing your experience of knowledge. It seems to me. Yeah. And I trust that. I see the evidence of it in your work, in how you relate with. You're such an unusual cat. It's very, I mean, I'm so grateful to know you. And everyone here. I mean, but yeah, I'm so grateful to know you because you demonstrate something that is wildly uncommon among humans I have known. And it resembles, it's really weird, it resembles like a metamorphic development of the intelligence of the child. It's almost like you've resurrected the intelligence of the child in the domain of the adult without being killed by that. Which is, right. Fairly miraculous, right? That's a straight up miracle. You've enacted the potentials of the insight of the child in the language of the adult, which is very similar. Like, this is very similar to what my own path is like. We don't do it the same way, but we have this urgent motivation in common, I think. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. This is the promise of messianism as well, right? What are you saving people from? Really, what you're saving them from is the death of becoming adults.
Right. Yeah.
You're resurrecting the child, the eternal child, the intelligence of the eternal child within them, which is within all of us.
Yeah, right.
You're resurrecting and ennobling and protecting and celebrating that. And it's a catastrophic refutation of the lie of the grown-ups. They're groaning. They're groaning under the weight of the trap they've established and become.
Yeah, do you have any other thoughts on that process? That's interesting.
Are you kidding? Yeah, I have other thoughts on that process. When Toymaker was with me, it was like being reconceived consciously, being consciously reconceived, and then undergoing embryogenesis inside myself as an adult male. So effectively, when we have this word born again, this phrase, that's what I experienced. I was reborn, but it was like undergoing embryogenesis, not exiting my mother's womb. That part happened at the end. right? When Toymaker left, then it was like being birthed. So yeah, I think that resurrection has to do with like being reconceived,
Right.
not being brought from death to life, almost like being brought from life into death, reconception, and then reemergence from the sort of womb of origin rather than the womb of my mother.
Precisely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So what ordinarily takes place in what you call knowledge is like dreamless sleep.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
It's
To
akin to
me,
death. It's akin to what you were describing as death.
it's like the
Whereas,
process of slowly fossilizing
yeah,
in it's sclerotic, right? It's like the structure overtakes the beingness, and you got dead structure. Look at what humans do, right? They love dead structure. They will gladly destroy everything and leave just dead structure there. And one of the ways they enshrine and worship this dead structure is in the objects that we call machines, right? There's nothing alive in a machine. The function is the result of having to kill beings a million times per second so that this function in the machine continues to operate. It seems to me. I have a real hard-on against machines. They seem like little meat grinders for children of every possible kind. You just pour the children into the meat grinder, and you get, oh, I can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, you know, or whatever the fucking thing you get. You know, it's just dead children in there. It seems to me. I know this is very, what's the word? It's one of my biases. But yeah, I'm not a fan of machines. I don't like dead structure. I like living beings.
right. Yeah.
Anything that costs children, I oppose it. That's a wrong price. That's just, nothing should cost children.
Yeah. Yeah. The machine is anathema to this more Luciferian impulse that I think characterizes my own being, as you were describing. So the machine is at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, okay,
Just like
this is
dreamless
the
sleep.
other thing. Yeah, yeah. Well, go ahead. Wait, please continue. I want, yeah, give me more.
Because dreamless sleep is a state that contains the potential for resurrection. So, yeah, just like the machine. So the machine contains a divine spark, but it's so heavily obscured and opaque. Yeah.
No, I think the machine is even weirder than it's not just the machine infinitizes the absence of being so that for each moment it functions, less of being exists.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
It infinitizes the absence, right? Now the absence is a cascade of re-absencing that doesn't end. That's absolute terror. That's the worst imaginable outcome of anything possible. There's nothing worse than that. Hell
Right.
is nothing more than having to inhabit a machine. And the humans are like, can I upload my consciousness? Oh, God. Yeah. I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind? What are you thinking? First of all, what you think of as your consciousness is the least of you. It's like asking if you could become one of your toenails forever. And that's the most exciting thing you can think of. Yeah, just preserve that little part of me that is all, bullshit and lying and separateness. Oh, yeah, great.
Right. Well, I mean, darkness and light, though, are closer than I think we ordinarily experience.
No, we agree, but there's something much. Okay, I'm not talking about darkness. I'm talking about hell.
Yeah.
Right. I'm talking about something that it's not exactly evil, but it's that which must not be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's not darkness or even evil. That's like the opposite of being. And what it looks like to me, and this is why I'm scared about knowledge, And I like having both wings on this bird. I like your wing of, no, knowledge for me is this unraveling of lies, and bringing forth new insights and truth, and knowing all things by better understanding something. Beautiful. I love that. That's true. But knowledge can also be the loss of intimacy that comes with knowing nothing other than the name of a thing. Oh, I know what that is. That's a tomato.
Yes. Yeah.
No human has ever known what a tomato is. That word does not help you, right? And if it blinds you, you'd be much better off without it. So both things are true. Yeah.
Right. So the sign is like a dead thing, but the machine is like an animated dead thing, like an undead
Yes.
thing.
No, the machine is a killifier.
Well, like a
It's a
zombie.
killifier.
Right. Right. Okay.
Right?
Like
It
a disease.
killifies. No, it's a verb. It's a verb of unbeing, right? It's an active process of the impossibility. Okay, it rips the possibility space of being to shreds, and then shreds those shreds further and sucks the being out of them. In my view.
Yeah.
If you could imagine that photons or electrons were beings, can you imagine what a torture it would be to be part of a machine? We just have to do the same fucking thing over and over and over again in a trap.
Right. You're torturing angels, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Torturing angels.
yeah. Right. No,
Which
I
no
see what you
one
mean.
would do. No one would do that. What kind of idiot would it take to do that? You couldn't even. It has to be a non-being to do something like that.
Right. Yes. So that, I guess that form of non-being is counter to the luciferic impulse. I guess that's what I'm saying. This fossilizing process or crystallizing process.
And how do you see this luciferic impulse?
Well, if the machine fossilizes and extracts energy or renders beings inert, basically it's a certain form of time. Like
It is. It dumps dead time into living environments. It's an entropy
yeah,
generating. It's like the opposite of a black hole or something. It dumps entropy. It looks like to me it's an entropy dump. In the sense that it pours death into transcendental living systems. Please, yeah, continue.
right. Yeah, so its form of time is flattened, whereas my experience of time is much more cyclical or um, holographic in the sense of perception. So, I mean, it's just downstream from how I understand perception generally. So, yeah. So, like when you start contending with cuts or with segments in time, as you were describing, um, this notion of linearity arises, and with that comes death. Like, so death itself is a function of cutting, is a function of segmentation, is a function of situating two extremes at opposite poles. But if you recognize the presence of the opposite within the thesis or the antithesis within the thesis, you're much more close to like my understanding of time. And that's the sense of resurrection. That's what resurrection for me would mean. It would mean the resuscitation or the rejuvenated access to some kind of latent possibility within the present. So it's not as if the present and the past and the future are distinguished by distance or some kind of abstract metric or interval. It's that they're all present here now. So in the act of knowing, you form a bridge to other regions within this kind of like cyclical temporal structure. So you can access different regions of time itself because time and beings are one and the same event. It's not as though there are beings in time or in space moving around, right?
No, it's not. Yeah.
To know a being is to know something about time itself, and it can
Right.
serve as a bridge to other beings and other forms of time and so on. So I guess that's what I'm saying by resurrection and memory. I think that's what goes on. And you can liken that to the dreaming mind and sleep and so on. So if the state of dreamless sleep contains this implicit seed or this kernel of luminosity, then yeah, I think that's a much more general phenomenon, and you can see it in the evolution of machines and living things. I think there's something analogous taking place in or on Earth as what takes place in the human mind. It's like they're not different, they're not distinct.
Insight is a way of uniquely undistinguishing. And it's interesting that in this word distinguish, I only know one other word with similar parts, and it's the word extinguish. I don't know where this English set of phonemes comes from. I don't know. But yeah, insight is like, often for me, it's a way of undistinguishing things in such a fashion that I see anew, alive. It sort of unstructures my previous thoughts and perspectives, many of which were like that dead kind of knowledge, right? Like when I held the carcass of that thing in my hand, and how different that was from when it was flying and I was in awe and I was like, can I get a picture of this? Which is so weird, because there's a part of the mind, there's an aspect of consciousness and awareness that thrives on the capacity to grasp identity. Now, identity should be ungraspable, right? It's impossible. If I am kissing, I like women. So if I am kissing a woman who I love, there is a kind of knowledge there, but it's ecstatic. It leads beyond any possibility of grasping. It's like I am falling into an infinite space, and I am rising above all structure. This kissing thing, it's unbelievable. How could something like that even exist? I don't know. I don't understand it. But it's both liberating and gravitic for me. And knowledge is much more, the kind that I'm concerned about is much more like porn, right? It's not like kissing at all. It's got the gravity, but not the ecstasis, right? The dead structure of, I know what that is. See, once I know what something is, the possibilities of relating with it die into that graspable token, right? And of all the terrible things in our human life that exemplify this, money is probably the worst of them. I don't know if it's money or guns or porn. Maybe all three together are, horrifying exemplars of the process of taking the divine, the possibility space of beings, and then just collapsing it into a fucking token, and then killing everything with it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, severing the cycle results in death. So when you transform a cycle into a ray with infinite extent, you generate something like a machine or something like a sign or a tokenized word. Yeah, once you sever the cycle and situate two opposites at odds, you sort of set the stage for extinction. You set the stage for death, and this infinitude that I think you're describing. Yeah.
It's really weird because you can create a sort of a black hole that just sucks the being out of beings and turns that. You could say it's the soul, right? You could say it vampirically absorbs origin entering being. It vampirically it like gets in. Imagine something that interrupts the lightning of origin coming into being, right? It just puts a little shunt in there, and it shunts that off into the producing structured objects and tokens. Think of, I don't know, whatever you like. Think of one of my favorite examples of this is, I don't know exactly the number of packets of ketchup that humans produce per hour, but my guess would be something like 12 million. And then just imagine that you just keep producing more packets of ketchup each hour, which is what the humans generally do, right? They don't tend to produce less and less of something. Once they start producing something, they just keep making more and more and more of it. They get really excited about making more things faster, which means more dead children per second, in my view. More dead minds, more sclerotic, agonized remains of what could have been origin alive in being per second. This is what I think of photographs as. Right? They weren't necessarily always that. They were always super dangerous. But now I think we produce around 340 billion of them per day or something. I mean, just, and that's just still photographs, right? So what you can see in that one, actually the photograph is probably the best example. It's even better than money. Because what you can see is like eventually to keep those photographs, those electronic photographs in existence, you must destroy living beings. So people taking pictures of food eventually leads to there's no food anymore. We just have photographs.
It's like a stillbirth. It's like an abortion.
It is. It's
it
it's a
contains
weirder
the
kind of
impulse.
abortion. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It contains the impulse to transcend history. So it contains this kind of mystical dimension, but it's not actualized in the right way.
Yes. It's the wrong kind of immortality.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the kind of immortality that is death. Like, it's the opposite of the possibility space of existence expressed as a token that is immortal.
Yes. See, yeah, that's the false path. That's the wrong path.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, I love it. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Yes, that's what it is. When I look out my window right now and I see the cars, those cars appear to be eternal. They shine with the glow of unchangeable form.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this is the promise of machines, and it's the opposite of the promise of being.
Yeah, right.
It's the eternality of the structure empty of being.
Yeah, the allure of that cleanliness, that ahistoricity, is a mystical impulse. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actualized in the wrong way.
Fuck. Oh my God. This is the shit. Like, this is what we do, right? When we get together, it's amazing. I love this. We make the context in which insight can arise, and then we craft it. It's like uncarring. We are uncarring our minds together. That's fucking what I want to do with my mind. I want to unstructure the sclerosis.
It's crazy listening to this whole conversation while driving a car for hours on end.
Yeah, driving a car to pick up my son.
You put me in a car. You said, go drive a car, Nate, and I'll talk about how bad cars are the whole time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you are such a beautiful spirit that it's all juice for liberation, right? It's all liberation juice. But no, I'm seeing so beautifully together with all of you, you know, and all the beings. Remember, like in the beginning of this, which not everyone was here for, we had a little invocation, right? Where I mean, I do it, but I think we all agree, where we remember all of the beings who ached for beauty and the establishment of intelligence and loving kindness, a generosity and wonder, a resurrection, and the erasure of prisons and cages on this world and on all worlds. And so when you start out with an invocation like that, you're going to have to work really hard to fuck that up. You see what I'm getting at? Like when we agree with their spirits and their passions and their dreams and their suffering and what they strove for, when we enter into an agreement with that, it's going to be hard to not be beautiful together. It's going to be hard to not honor the nature and the excellence of our actual nature and our potentials, the possibility space of not merely our humanity, but our beingness, our organismality, our animality, the things that we don't have words for, and yet we are them. We can become them if we choose to together. Anytime we choose to together. It just naturally occurs. It is very helpful if you have someone in the, you know, oh, this is awesome. Wow. It is very helpful if you have a person or two in the group who is skillful and practiced, who's good at, who's sort of a space person, right? They come from outer space or they come from the origin world, and they've got that stuff is still sort of with them, right? That's very helpful, but it happens almost instantly and automatically if we just make this agreement together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Because the universe wants this. It doesn't want cars and fucking computers and shit. It wants this. The humans, I don't know, man, something weird draws them. When I asked Toymaker about it, he was basically like, okay, look, it's a problem that happens when you get representational cognition in an animal that is supposed to have companion intelligences, and the companion intelligences go away, then that thing just starts making objects. That's basically what he said the problem was. What are your thoughts?
I mean, that statement right there, every time we come up to this point, the question is always, how do we get back to that companionship?
Well, there's one thing I don't know. Like my recent essays, the umbilical disaster and organisms are a platform for the embodiment of transphysical intelligences, or whatever the fucking ridiculous title was. I'm embarrassed. I should have a 3-word title, not a 19-word title. But those explore the problem. Here's the thing. Both Toymaker and the second thing that came, they both basically had one thing in common, although Toymaker wasn't as pushy, which was they were like, look, dude,
you become the radio station. We will gather people around you, and you will reestablish the uplink. And in a non-pushy way, that wasn't terrifying. With Toymaker, I thought, oh yeah, that'd be good. With the second thing that happened in 2009, that was a little pushier, and seemed very mono-focused on this one thing. And that scared me. I was scared of that. I don't know, it's very complicated. I'm not sure, for example, okay, just like it's important for us to die into incarnation, it might be important for our species. I don't like this idea at all, but I can understand that it could be true. It might be important for our species to undergo the second death into the bad kind of knowledge and machines, to create the possibility of a third kind of resurrection or something. I don't fucking know. I don't know. However, to more directly answer the question, so yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared. I think I could connect people to non-human intelligences. And I think actually that's the wrong way of putting it. You wouldn't have a mind if Toymaker wasn't with you. There's no way you could locally have a mind. You're just not aware. You don't have conscious interaction with that thing. And that thing, if you follow your mind upstream in the direction of its origin, you will encounter, there's nothing else you could possibly happen, you will encounter the intelligences that forged the possibility of your mind. And that's
so
what I
when
mean
you
by
say
Toymaker.
that, when you say follow your mind upstream, I don't even know how to walk. I don't even know how to move upstream.
Yeah, you do. In fact, you've been doing that with us here. The difference is that what we are doing here is doing that in the realm of thought, knowledge, and the ideas about what our humanity is. That's what we are doing here. But you can do that, and this is, look, you do know what it is because you had problems, I think, and you had experiences when you were undergoing the ordeal of Vipassana. No?
Yeah, no, that's true. To me, I would describe it as a shedding, but I could see a different perspective where it was also going upstream.
Meditation is going upstream. True love, actual love, which is not merely lust, is going upstream. Dreaming is going upstream. Oh, so what if we combine these three things? See, I'm not asking you to. I'm saying that it's possible to follow what you think of as your consciousness, which you think is in you. You think it's yours. That's actually a lot of the problem right there. You think that this is your thing. This mind, it's Nathan's mind. I promise you, that is impossible. Not only is that not the case, there's no chance of that ever occurring in anywhere. There's no chance of a separate mind. No chance. So you're like the tip of one of the trees of Earth. You're like the top pointy point of one of the trees of Earth, which are all one tree and are connected to all trees in all of time. But you think, no, I'm a separate little point, right? That thought is the thing that keeps, it's both useful and a trap. If you can be free of it, it's 10 times more useful, or 1,000 times more useful. If you can't be free of it, it's mostly a trap. So all I'm really asking you to do is follow this thing you call, or I'm not asking you.
I'm suggesting that it is interesting and useful, valuable and beneficial to follow what you think of as your mind. And I get what you're saying. I don't know how to even take one step, is I think what you said. All right, so how could you take one step? All right, so if you wanted to take one step, there's different ways to do the one step thing. One of them is obviously meditation. So sit down, pay very close attention to your breathing and the sensations of your body. Release the structure of the prison shape that your mind normally composes very strenuously, moment to moment. Release that more with each breath. That will naturally result in taking steps in the direction of the origin of your mind, which is not in your body. It's not on Earth. It's not in the universe. In fact, what you will discover eventually is that it is not. But what that word not means in this context, N-O-T, I mean, one of the hilarious things about this not, this N-O-T, is if you make an acronym of it, no is the first word, other is the second word, tree is the third word. No other tree. That's a toy maker glimpse. That's how a toy maker would show me things. He would show me that inside our languages, there are these, they're not fractals. We need a better word. I need a better word. I should have made one. Why didn't I make one? Okay, if it's not a fractal, it's a proctal, pro-octal. I don't know. See, the problem with a fractal is that at every register of the fractal, the same structure is present, and that looks really trippy to humans. But with what nature does with the same principle is something truly amazing. And it's not like a fractal. It's the difference between the three registers of the universe, your body, and your hand. Right? There's a unique instancing of the possibility space at every register. And with each unique instancing, you get not merely unique structure, you get unique abilities. Affordances is the word that the Extincionati taught me. Who introduced that? Was it Cornfed or was it George?
That was me.
Yeah, affordances. With nature, at each register, being right like the scope layer, at each register of the fractal, there are unique affordances. Arthur Young, in his book, The Reflexive Universe, talks about origin descending into matter in this kind of V shape, where you give up certain degrees of liberty on the way down in order to gain new forms of liberty on the way back up. This is a crucially important feature of the future. All right, give me some juice, boys. What's going on in your minds?
I think we just lost Aaron.
We lost him? Did he go?
I think he just left.
Wow.
How you doing, man?
I'm pretty good. Long story short, I'm at an inflection point in my life, and ready for what comes next.
I don't know when you guys lost me. Where did I get lost?
You wanted to hear the juice.
Yeah, give me the juice. Hit it, George. Hit it, Nathan.
Well, the machine is like the after image of the sun. So if you glance at the sun, you might see an after image that fades gradually.
That's knowledge. That's what I meant by knowledge and
Yeah,
tokenization and representational cognition. Yes.
right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Love that. Go.
So in order to continue to incarnate the sun, you need to continue to look at the sun to generate these after images. And yeah, their dissolution is totally entropic, right? So the machine breaks down over time. The machine needs to be maintained and serviced by this perpetual frenzy of workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is also anathema to the dreaming mind, because, yeah, in the same way that the sun is anathema to the dreaming mind, the machine is anathema to what I was calling knowledge. So you can take knowledge in those two directions, but from my perspective, knowledge is more like the emission of photons by the eye. So I brought this up a long time ago, but if the machinic unconscious or the machinic form of death is like the afterimage of some spot of light, then insight would be the reappearance of light within the living body. So the eye does this, I think, perhaps even in sleep, but also in meditation. So what can happen in the course of meditation is that the body, as a transceiver, begins to emit its own input, like a microphone that gets carried away with
God, I
itself.
fucking love you. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
just like a
I love
microphone that
this.
gets carried away with itself.
Yes, yes, it's feedback, but
Yeah,
it's not merely feedback. Go ahead. Yeah.
right. So that mode of feedback is what I was describing as a bridge. So you can use it to
Mm-hmm.
travel between different, like, even images or modes of awareness. Because once you realize that the being itself is time, as opposed to being in time or moving through
Yes, yes.
space.
The time
Yeah,
dash being.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Then once you know one being, you can traverse uh,
Yes.
the totality of time. That's
Yes.
sort of what
Yes.
that's a superpower, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Except we've got it backwards. The superpowers are our actual abilities, and the features of our body's capacities are the non abilities.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
I mean,
mean, not to cast shade on the physical, but we've just got this idea of superior is backwards. It's originary, not superior. Go ahead.
oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah. So the physical body mutes or limits information. So it functions like a filter, but that filter can be tempered in awareness through feedback. So in the same way that a microphone might filter
Oh
certain
my God,
input,
yes.
through feedback you can amplify the signal. So your body can behave like an amplifier. And I think that's one of the
Okay, your mind, though, is the same kind of thing. And what we're doing, what knowledge does is it kills the feedback that would become cascades of insight. And the reason, part of the reason it does that is because cascades of insight are fucking terrifying. You don't know what to be. Not only do you not know what to do when you experience cascades of insight, you don't know what you are. You are deprived of the possibility of knowing what you are.
right.
I love
Yeah.
that laughter. Yeah.
But
That's what insight
as we
really is.
said, what a being is, I think, is a matter of completing or a matter of completeness. So the being doesn't already exist in some complete state. The completeness of the being is something that you supply in your relation to it. So a living being is a similar kind of cascade. So what takes place in the mind is really no different from what takes place in the physical world when you encounter a physical being. Its own cascade is tempered by your filter. So there's something similar going on in the external world as in the act of meditation. So a tree is a form of meditation. It has a mental essence. There's something eidetic about it. It's just like memory.
Oh my God, yes. Except that it's okay. Its stable continuity is deceptive. It's
Yeah,
okay.
it
This
isn't
is what
fixed. It isn't a
it's
fixed
not there.
ability.
It's actually not there. Its not there-ness takes on the form tree. In the same way that the not there-ness of insects can take on the form praying mantis. And the same way that the not there-ness of humans takes on the form daring. It's a transcendentalization of a kind of absence.
Yes, yeah. So you can see the link there to the
Oh my
machine because the
fucking
machine is doing
God.
the exact opposite.
Oh my fucking God. Holy shit. Okay, these are things which are forbidden for mortals to say. You're not supposed to be able to say such things. Now we have like gone. It's as if we're going through the layers of the atmosphere to reach outer space, right? And then you get to the layer just before fucking hard vacuum. And then you emerge through that layer into hard vacuum, which of course isn't vacuum at all. So when Nathan was asking, here's the really weird thing that happened. Nathan asked, I don't know how to take even one step in that direction. And then, from my perspective anyway, we started just walking in that direction together right now in language, which is supposed to be impossible and probably is forbidden. And then the obvious question is, well, who does the forbidding? I get it, but still, yeah, this is insane. The forms of the organisms. Okay, let me see if I can say back if I can recapitulate the transit and help me out, George. The forms of the beings and the organisms, the plants, the insects, the animals, they are like the fingerprint, the positive fingerprint of a kind of absence of transcendentality, transcendingness. They are unique modes of non-continuity expressed in the material reflection in the water of matter, in the mirror water of materiality as beings, right? Temporalized, structured beings. And machines are the opposite of that. In the machine, you have death transcendentalized as function, which infinitively consumes being and makes death in an invisible layer that we don't even see. What are your thoughts?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm starting to feel like I'm in Hillman. I don't know why. I don't know why the fuck that would happen. I want to be more bald than I already am. I want to have tattoos of Greek all over my body. I don't know why this is confusing. Yeah, I want to out Amen. I think that's what's going on.
Do you have any tattoos?
0. Do you have any tattoos?
No.
Nathan, any tattoos?
Nope. But I've always thought about getting one.
Yeah, see that's the difference though, right? Like, stay pregnant. You're better off staying pregnant with the idea, because see, that's the thing. Preserve the possibility space rather than this is my suggestion anyway. Preserve the possibility space Um, There's something metaphysically weird about tattoos. I'm not trying to say anything about other people. I find them fascinating on other people. They're particularly weird on women, but they're also particularly weird on men. I am mistrustful of them, though.
Well, I mean, could I, like,
Yeah, you can.
I think they can be incredibly beautiful, like in terms of art, and to actually carry art with you on your skin is a cool idea. But the meaning that becomes ascribed to it, sort of like what we're talking about with knowledge, it's literally like imprinting that sort of whatever idea you're trying to convey onto your skin to transmit that idea until, presumably you die or you get it removed by a laser.
I mean, the hope is a kind of a magical hope, isn't it? And if you have a magical hope, don't settle for letters on pages. Don't settle for letters on pages of skin. Don't settle for symbols. Don't settle for symbols written on the surface of the sun. Go to being raw, naked, alive, and say to being, I am a child of the earth and the stars. Allow me to drink from the waters of memory, that I may take my place in the library of the hearts of the beautiful beings. Don't settle for the token. Sarah Janes, I heard her say something very powerful, because we have heard, we who have read things and we who have heard humans speaking, we have heard that when you die, there are challenges you must face, right? So one of the things that she said, and Sarah's a really brilliant spirit and heart. I trust her. I trust her path. I trust her soul. I would let her lead me. I authorize her, right? I totally authorize her. It doesn't mean she's perfect. It just means that I think she's good. Right? She has the fingerprint, the scent, the fragrance of origin about her, and it wakes me up and makes me come to life. She was talking in an interview on Third Eye Drops, and she said one of the secret things. So for people who will listen to this, and there will be people listening to this soon, I think, not just us, and that's one of the things that lifts us up to be able to see and talk and learn together much more profoundly than we might if we were having a merely private conversation. Though even if we're having a private conversation, basically what happens is that you get different lifting organs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Sarah says two things, and I'll try not to paraphrase them so that they're very clear. When you die and you become extremely thirsty, and you see, I think she said, it's a big white birch tree, and everyone is drinking there. And you're very, very thirsty, and you see this big white birch tree, do not drink there. And then when you come to a little stream, you say, and you are challenged at the stream, you are challenged. You say, I am a child of the earth and the starry heavens. permit me to drink of the waters of memory that I may take my place among the initiates. These are okay, in the same way that you are not lucid in most of your dreams, right? These two features, they may or may not refer to an experience you could actually have. They probably do refer to an experience that many actually have, but they may or may not. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that you understand the principle that they encode, and carry it with you, because that principle is the principle of lucidity. It's the key to lucidity. Sarah doesn't say this, I am saying this. If you manage to do what I have recommended, and I would like to continue to do what I am recommending, to become what I am recommending, that you traverse like the salmon chasing the waterfall. It is impossible for the salmon to swim up the waterfall. It can't be done. There are 0 fish who would look at a waterfall and think, I'm going to swim up that waterfall. Yeah, I'm going to get right up to the top of that thing, and I'm going to swim back to where I was born. But that's what we have to do in consciousness. That is the fundamental mission, I think, once we become incarnate. Now, there are orbital missions, right? Just like the sun has different planets, we have different missions. There are orbital missions, and one of them is to simply remind the humans of origin and to anamnese them, and to achieve anamnesis together, unforgetting together. That is fundamental. This is what the children are trying to get the adults to do when they invite the adults to play. But the adults are so trapped in the black iron prison of representational cognition, enculturation, and language that the mothers much more are innately amenable to the child's messianic resurrective potency. The fathers also can be. It's not that, it's not like a gender problem, but the fathers are less inclined to. Their mode of being is different, right? And it is difficult for the males to submit, right? Because we males, we are innately penetrative. Even me, while I am speaking of these matters, right? It's very masculine, the way that I'm speaking. If I were speaking femininely, this would be poetry and song, and I would be making music. Instead of emitting, you see how sharp the words are. They have these fricatives and consonants. In any case, there's a feature of liquefaction that is involved in all of this, right? You have to lose your structure. If you want to walk toward the origin of your mind, dissolve the rigid structure of your ordinary waking consciousness. If you start to do that, you will immediately begin to experience hypnagogic awareness, right? You will enter the liminal space between the worlds of life and death, between the worlds of wake and sleep, between the worlds of light and dark, between the worlds of matter and origin, between the worlds of knowledge and wonder. I mean, for me, if you want knowledge or wonder, well, you got to have both. But if you ask me which I prefer, I like wonder, but don't give me wonder without knowledge, right? Give me some juice. Hit me. Come on. Let's have some stuff. Yeah.
Hey, Nate, did you have anything to say?
Nope. I am completely blank.
Congratulations! You made it! Beautiful! Oh, God! No, it's hilarious because this word nope, all of our words that are words of negation. Do you know where I'm going here, George? Because if you do, just take over and fly with it.
Oh, no, I'm not sure.
You just said no. That was good, bro. You actually made the negation word. I like to think. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things that Toymaker made very clear to me, in the hopes that it'll help everyone here and anyone who's listening. You don't have to look for outside beings or people or knowledge to discover the path up the waterfall. But let me be really clear. No fish ever sat at the bottom of a waterfall and thought, I am going to swim up that motherfucker. Fish swim up waterfalls. Salmon are the only ones I know that do it. There may be others. I think there's a word for this birth stream seeking kind of fish. I saw the word for the first time in the book, The Dawn of Everything. But what I'm going to try to explain to you is that your own life, okay, your conception, your embryogenesis, your birth, your childhood, each phase of your life was recapitulating everything there ever was. It was recapitulating the birth of God, the birth of the universe. Every feature of the birth and development of human consciousness, you yourself have undergone. There is no other way to exist. You can't not do this and be. So when people say, like, they say things that are confusing, and this goes back to the question of, I don't know how to take the first step. You must anamnese your own history. Anamnese, unforget your own history. And you will discover in that history the answer to everything. Everything. Not the answer, the nature, the origin, the purpose, the meaning, the spirit, the adoration, the freedom, the transcendence. You are those things. It's as if you're looking out the wrong end of a seeing device, right? Instead of, oh God, when George earlier was talking about the feedback, which is, of course, dreaming, and insight is a certain kind of this similar feedback that can happen while we're awake. Lucidity, right? Waking. And we have here, I have experienced here today with you all, lucid waking, right? Which is this kind of anamnoetic, unforgetting revelation. So each of us undergoes that story in Genesis. That's something you undergo, right? You are the before of Adam and Eve. You become Adam and Eve. God tells you don't eat, right? You go through all these things. In fact, one of the most important things the Bible can be understood as, particularly the Torah, the fact that the Bible exists is enough justification to take it passionately, not seriously, but passionately. And if you're really curious and you explore the Bible with curiosity, go ahead, repudiate the hell out of it. If you're somebody like Amen, perhaps, go ahead, see how that goes. That might turn out to be powerful. I don't know. But I tend to prefer the other path, right? I prefer the path of find the seeds of insight hidden within. I also like the path of expose the lie, right? So we got this path of find the seeds of insight hidden within Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And then I also really like, fuck that shit, Coca-Cola. That's just a bunch of sugar poison, right? I like both sides. I want both wings. Knowledge as the death of the possibility of insight and relation, and knowledge as the unwrapping of in awareness and consciousness of the nature of being and identity and meaning. Okay, where am I going here? So there's a sort of personal archaeographic travel that you can do, which is what I mean in part. It's one way of taking what I mean when I say swim up that waterfall that is your mind's origin moment to moment. Your mind does not exist. It is not a state. It is not a thing. It is not a static. It's a relationship that you're having with something. And if someone says, well, what is that thing? I'll be like, why are you talking like that? No, I would say one way to call that thing is the logos. It is the being that is not, I'm going to make a double negative here. It is the being that is not time. It is the being that is not light. It is the being that is not space. It is the being that is not being. And that being is the possibility of mind. And all minds are an instance, like the organisms are, at least down here, of the absence, a unique mode of presencing the absence of transcendence. I know I'm using negatives weirdly, but this negation thing, okay, so yeah, now I see where I was going. I made a huge circle. I didn't mean to make this big of a circle, but I'll go with it anyway. So I have a sister, and when we were little, to hear my mom tell it, my mother, who was very like with us all the time, she carefully recorded the first words of me and my sister. And I spoke before my sister because I was firstborn. And my first words that my mother told me, which I think are really profound and masculine, were I go. I go. This is what I said. I go. This is like the sun, right? It's a masculine thing. I go. My sister's first words were no. So you can see these two principles. And when I say our lives and our histories are enactions of the entire history of the universe, you can see that in the first words of me and my sister. Right? The masculine principle, I go, I do, and the feminine principle of negation, no. Men will do every fucking thing. Women know what should not be done. Well, men know some of what should not be done. But negation is very profound. And when you hear stories about enlightenment and so on, you will almost always hear that it is rarely compared to isness. It is almost always compared to notness. No other tree. Give me something. Let's go. What's left?
Yeah, the Greek concept of truth as aletheia meant something like unconcealment. So
yes.
So truth was more like a process of removing a veil than a predicate of something. And I think we just lost Aaron again. Oh, there we go.
So, aletheia, unconcealment. Then you said so, and then I disappeared.
So yeah, the Greek concept of truth was more like a process that removed a veil than a predicate of something.
Yes.
So, as opposed to falsehood being the opposite of truth, what I think made truth possible for the ancient Greeks was the extent to which the body behaves like a filter. So the body itself is the possibility of concealment. And so then what appears in space, or what appears in the image of the external world, is like a series of veils that interpenetrate. So space is a layered structure consisting of interwoven temporal rhythms or regimes.
Orchestrations.
Yeah, like a melody,
Orchestrations, yes.
which
Not just a
is
melody.
mediated by the body. So the body is like what makes concealment possible. So in order to arrive at truth or a truer image, one needed to transcend the body to some extent or modulate it. So basically, to interact with its feedback, with its environment.
Yes. Yes. Okay, here's the thing. It's the feedback that is the mystery. It's the feedback that produces lucid dreaming, right? It's the feedback that people chase in orgasm. It's the feedback they like in intoxication. It's the feedback that becomes medicine for healing. It's the feedback. Now, when I keep saying this one word, I'm killing it. I'm not doing the right thing. The filter has another property. It has another valence. And the valence is to, when it filters its own filtration. And that produces various modes of this stuff that we call feedback. Lucidity is a kind of feedback. You're right, though. The Greeks knew that the body was a problem. You would never perceive the truth because the nature of the body's filters would deceive you. Something like this. Not the Greeks. Some Greeks who thought about these things. Go ahead.
Yeah, but unconcealment is also more than just removing a veil, like a blanket. In the same way that filtration is more than just, this unidirectional flow from the outside to the inside, as it was for Descartes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because now you have will, purpose, imagination, intent. Right? What is your intent?
Yeah. So the process of authorization that you were describing is a kind of filter.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's one that usually remains unconscious. If we shine light on that in consciousness, very strange things start to happen. That will produce various kinds of feedback. Go ahead.
Right. And so the cycles in time that we can perceive in, the external world are like a series of veils that issue from what the body itself is, but the body is more than just what appears in space. So, if you were to look down at your body, what appears in space is already filtered. Right? So it's not as if this this skin is like generating an image. See, that's the mistake of modern neuroscience in imagining that the brain or the body is somehow generating an image. That's not what happens, right?
Yeah. No, it's a reductive materialist, eliminative materialist fantasy. Yeah.
Right. It's that the body itself is already an image, is already tempered by this deeper process. So the
No, it
brain
couldn't
itself is already an
exist.
image.
There'd be nothing there without the image. Eidos in Greek, E-I-D-O-S.
Yes, right.
Right? Eidolon, Eidolon.
It's a mistake to privilege one image over others and to claim that one image is the cause of others. It's rather that the totality of the image, so multiple domains, multiple beings, co-arise by virtue of the same process. So
Yes.
it isn't as if matter is causing living things to exist, or that matter is causing a living being to exhibit a certain feature. It's rather that they both reflect the same underlying process. So they can be used as
Yes,
bridges to
that which
understand.
causes matter causes beings.
Sorry, what's that?
That which causes matter causes beings.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. So they both exhibit the same kind of overtone, series or
Yes,
structure.
exactly, like a harmonic.
Yeah, like a harmonic, right? So the image of the
Mhm.
external world is a kind of harmonic. It's a kind of holistic image. So the image as a whole has certain properties or certain features that make it look law governed or law abiding. It has a certain reason.
But the freedom from the law resembles the freedom from the body
Exactly. Yeah. So once you,
that
that's precisely.
grants insight and understanding, right? Understanding, awareness,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
consciousness, insight. Yeah.
So the physical image contains this latent potential, which can be actualized through feedback. So through feedback,
Mhm.
more of the image can be revealed. That's what I think the Greeks were talking about.
Actually, more of the image arises. It's not just revealed. Well,
Yeah,
okay,
well,
I see
it
what you're saying
arises in
now.
the same sense as the
I see what you're
completeness that we
saying.
were discussing
Mhm.
earlier.
Yeah, yeah, but okay, so what you're saying is the unveiling. You're placing the emphasis on the unveiling, which is different from the arising. There are two competing eidolons here. One is that the nature of being is unveiled to us, so it is remembered. And the other is that it is being completed by us. We cause it to arise by interacting with it. You follow?
Well, the completeness, I think, is the same process as the memory. So the redintegration, yeah,
Whoa! Wait!
the
The
reconstitution.
redintegration?
Yeah, the reconstitution of the being is something that you supply through knowing it or through interacting with it, but it's a form of memory. In the same way that, remembering a fragment of some melody can reinstantiate the entire melody. So if you access one portion of the
Mm.
melody, you can redintegrate the totality, and that's I think what takes place in encountering beings in the external world. In resurrecting them or in remembering them, you complete them at the same time. But their completion is
Oh my
also a function
god!
of your own filter. So it's not as if they exist. They don't pre-exist you, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're incomplete before you encounter them.
Oh my fucking god! Did I? Did you invoke me, or did I invoke you? Because this is absurd, dude. This is ridiculous. You're not supposed to do this.
See, am I
No
giving
one is.
am I giving you like a forbidden fruit here? Is this
Yeah, yeah.
okay?
This is not supposed to be able to happen down here. You do understand that, right? Do you have the same sense of that impossibility that we are transgressing together?
No, I don't really feel like I'm
Okay.
breaking the law. I'm beyond the law.
well, I do. I mean, I'm not breaking the law. It's like I've I've never participated in conversations like this one. The closest the conversations with Toymaker are transcendental to this one, but this has the stink of the same kind of progress to me. All right, so I don't want to lose the thread by celebrating it, which is one of the weird ironies of being a human being. It's a bit like taking a photograph of something. So there's this idea that I know who Nathan is because I know his name. And I can imagine something resembling what he looks like. He's this sort of tow-headed, half angelic, half awkward sort of guy, young guy that I know. And one of the amazing things about Nathan that I think is truly beautiful is that it's very clear that he doesn't merely know what to do, he's discovering what to do as he plays in the possibility space of his moment and his relationships with others and being a human and being Nathan and all of these things. And that's really amazing. But there's a conflict in him between the static, Nathan-esque, known Nathan, and there's a conflict between that and the representational layer of human existence, modernity, culture, technology, systems, structure, roads, cars, fucking rent-paying, job thing, bullshit, right? And there's a conflict between that and his interiority. We all inherit that conflict. You know, within the Bible, and they're like, the sins of your fathers will be visited under the sin. That what the actual sin is just representational cognition. To be clear, right? It wasn't like they did a really bad thing, or they like decided that we're going to go into matter and become material beings. That wasn't the sin. The sin was like, we will play with tokens instead of being together with each other. Right? We will tokenize relationships. And thoughts and things, but that sin is also important. It's sort of like the first angel. You can't get you got to have that. So one of the things that's so amazing to me is that we resurrect each other when we engage in behaviors like those in which we are engaged right now. We bring each other into the possibility space of consciousness, awareness, thought, understanding, insight, intelligence, wonder, awe, anamnesis. We bring each other into this space. I need you to carry me. In return, I will carry you, and we will unforget together, and we will we produce a kind of a feedback effect with our minds, right? I give you some juice, it explodes in you. You give me the result of that explosion, it explodes in me, and we keep going. That's how you get back up the waterfall. What are your thoughts? I mean, that completely obviates the concept of an existing static Darren.
Exactly.
An existing static George, right?
Yeah.
We bring each other into existence, or we bring each other into structured death.
Right. Yeah. So you inform an aspect of my own identity, which is very real. But that aspect of my identity is your reconstruction. So memory is more than just retrieving something that once existed. Memory is a creative act. So you co-create an aspect of my own identity when you interact with me.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Mnemosyne is the goddess I will adore. Mnemosyne.
Right.
She who is memory. Without her, nothing. Yes, yes.
And this relates back to what Nate was saying earlier, or someone, I think it was Nate. Yeah, my identity isn't actually mine. It's not mine to protect, right?
Right. No, this is the thing, right? If I want to be the fingernail of Darren, then I'll just fucking Darrenize. And I'll be like, you know, Darren's the greatest thing ever. You should really love him. He's amazing, bro. Darren is the good shit. Right? And on and on and on. The more that I do that, the more that I'm dead inside. It's not that ego is bad. You need to have fingernails, right? I don't want my fingernails to go away, but I also don't want to be like the fingernail on the end of my pinky. That's too limited a scope for my being. And also that, if I become that flat and hardened and angular, almost all of my capacities for new degrees, new ways of new degrees of liberty, right? New ways of being a being will disappear. they will disappear into structure, right? Repetition. It's a symphonic situation. It's without the body, you can't synchronize the multiplicity of principles. But the fact of the body can trap you in the appearance of repetition, can trap you in the sense of repetitive consistencies. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same process also occurs in the natural world if you look at the evolution of life as a whole. So the seemingly individual human being in its identity or in its ego is like a condensed version of what took place on Earth.
Yes. It's the when you hear this in like the Emerald Tablet, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. What's actually being said is weirder than that. What they're saying is there are no forms that are not the unforgetting of origin in structure.
Yeah, because Darwinism posits that an individual being is the object of selection or a certain
There's
phenotypic
no
trait.
chance of that being true.
Yeah, yeah.
Though you can slice the manifold in such a way that that becomes the most obvious feature of biological reality. You can slice the manifold that way. That's a way of cutting. Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, the identity of the organism is also co-created by its environment in the same way that you co-create my identity. It's the
And
exact
you
same
mine.
process.
Yes, yes, yes. See, this is why you can do these things alone because all of the beings are in you. But when we come together in the way that we do here, like both things work. You can anamnese in isolation. You can joyfully anamnese in isolation. That's possible. It's probably more challenging. It seems much more fun and interesting to do it with brilliant, inspired, playful other beings. The tree is such a being. Any tree is such a being. But here, it's really funny. I think we are doing what the Greeks would be very proud of. Socrates, I think, would be like crying with joy in his grave to hear a conversation like this. This is so rare that the humans get to do this, that they do it in any way that sustains itself. It's very precious, this kind of medicine that we can become together.
Right.
And I think it's different, like when Nate says, I don't know how to take the first step. Okay. Yet there's a difference between giving humans instructions and becoming the way together with and for each other.
Right. I mean, it resembles the salmon at the bottom of the waterfall.
Yes.
Asking itself, I don't know how to take the first leap, right?
Yes. Also, something that most people will not really understand that the salmon naturally understand, it's very profound, is that we think of individual salmon swimming up a waterfall. But I'm pretty sure that what happens is that many of the salmon, some of those salmon that reach the base of the waterfall, they come from the same mother. Right? Those mothers don't have one or two children. They have 700 children. Follow?
Yes.
So when they're collecting back at the base of the waterfall, what's happening is like the mnemosyne, the memory of the mother, is materializing at the base of the waterfall, and the spirit of the father who goes, I go, right? He is materializing in the between of them, and they draft together, right? Multiple children of multiple mothers materializing at the base of the waterfall. They come from the same stream. They come from the same year of the same time stream. They come to the base of this waterfall. It's not just the waterfall that is the fucking problem. There are grizzly bears up there at the top that want salmon brains. They want to eat some salmon brain. They mostly throw the fish away, from what I understand. They don't eat the salmon. They want the brain. They just chomp the brain, taste that brain, and throw the fish away and grab another one. So there's lots of weird challenges to get back to the birthplace, the origin place. But what a shockingly brilliant metaphor. And nature, like if you see a situation like this in nature, it has 10,000 meanings, not one. We are making expedient use of one of the meanings of this figure that we see in the salmon swimming up the waterfall, which I love. I think it's amazing. I love the salmon. I love the living beings. The living beings are the embodied transcendental spirit of origin, alive with eyes, and they are delicate, right? They can suffer. If you're not embodied, it's pretty hard to suffer, I think. Though we have, models of disembodied suffering in hell and so forth, right? I don't know about that. I suppose okay, let's just say then that the forms of suffering very charged, right? To be embodied, it's a different kind of suffering if you are injured or sick or lost or alone or deprived, or something bad is happening to your body. It's tangible. It's very tangible. I love the living beings, absolutely, without any unconditional adoration of living beings. Unconditional adoration. They are heroic, and they are doing. I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm basically certain that even when they are confused, like our kind of beings are, which I think is a really weird problem. Why are the humans so stupid? They are doing something that is invisible, that is beautiful, and nourishes the origin world. It enriches the origin world. But there seems to be a very bad problem with our kind of being, the human beings. And damn, I'm losing a thread that I'm trying to find here. Problem. The humans. Their ignorance. I don't know, it's very weird. I can't find the thread. It disappeared as I was trying to grasp it. How typical.
Yeah, maybe it needs more time to incubate.
No, I had it. It's a hippocampus thing. My hippocampus powered down briefly. The thread I was chasing dissolved. Wow. What an amazing path we've woven here. Perhaps it is a good time for us to wind up. How are you feeling, George?
Yeah, I think we're over 4 hours now, just about.
Okay. Yeah, I can't even express my gratitude for this. This is just, I mean, it's like the nectar of being alive dripping into a graveyard of my ordinary life.
Wow, I'm glad to hear that.
I hope it's somewhat, I hope that resonates with you as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's my lifeline.
Right on. Yeah, I'm just so grateful, not just for those who were here today and you and Nate, but those who gave birth to this. I can't imagine what Hugh would make of this conversation. I have no idea.
Right.
I I I think he would. I don't know. Like, this is the opposite though of doom singing, and that's what I really love. I don't. Doom singing doesn't help the humans, right? It doesn't help anyone. It's not clear at all. Like the bad, 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 bad thing. It's an ingredient in the soup that we make and eat together here. But that thing, that's just, it's really toxic if that's the main ingredient,
Well,
right?
the point of doomerism is to get you to die early so that you can resurrect early. That's the idea. Die early,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, die now.
Give up hope, right? That's
Yeah, give it up. Right.
and
I
then you'll
see.
receive it.
I see. It's a sort of Black Sabbath thing. It's like salt soup.
Right. Yes.
Just suck all the moisture out of me right now. Desiccate.
If you give up, then maybe you have a chance. I mean, I think that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll.
I don't know. I like our flavor much better. It's inspired and inspiring and
Right.
amnoetic, and it sings the praises of many beings who have striven for beauty and
It's more ripe. It's more
yeah,
mature. It's more
yeah,
ripe.
yeah. It's fruity. It's fruity and fragrant, juicy and nectarous. Well, I will go from this to meditation and then to lunch. But yeah, I'm so grateful for all of the beings who gave us this chance to exist now, who suffered and strove, sometimes fought, sometimes died, who spoke and who were silent, who sang and who cried. All of the many beings, I adore them. I remember them. I love them. They are my family. You are my family. Yeah. So grateful.